The old man did not fall when the snow reached his knees. He kept walking with pans clanging against his back, while the old woman behind him carried a swollen backpack like a house made of cloth. Cole Whitaker, a retired Navy SEAL, almost drove past. Then his German shepherd froze, and Cole recognized the man who had once saved his life. Snow had been falling over Telluride since before dawn, the kind of snow that seemed less like weather and more like a white decision made by the mountains. It swallowed fence posts, softened the hard shoulders of the road, and turned the pines into silent witnesses standing in rows along the switchbacks. Cole Whitaker drove his old dark green pickup with both hands on the wheel, not because the road frightened him, but because his body remembered too many roads where one careless inch could become a last mistake. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat and black saddle, his ears angled forward, his scarred right ear twitching every time the tires crushed a hidden ridge of ice. The heater clicked and blew more noise than warmth. Cole had meant to sell the truck 3 times and kept it all 3 times, because Ranger liked the cracked vinyl seat, and because some men could run companies from glass offices, but still mistrusted anything too new to have a few dents in it. He was 42, broad-shouldered, close-cropped dark hair silvering at the temples, and he carried himself with the quiet stiffness of someone who had learned how to move through danger without asking permission from it. He had just left a meeting with county planners about a piece of land he wanted to buy for a veterans recovery center, though even saying the words aloud still made him uncomfortable. Recovery center. It sounded noble on paper. In Cole's chest it felt more like a confession he was not ready to make. Ranger nudged his gloved hand as if sensing the turn his thoughts had taken. "I know," Cole muttered. "Big feelings, terrible habit." Ranger huffed once against the window. It looked enough like judgment that Cole almost smiled. The road curved past a stand of aspen and dipped toward a long white stretch bordered by leaning barbed wire. That was when Ranger rose from the seat, not slowly, not with curiosity. He stood as if a command had moved through him without sound, nose lifted, eyes locked ahead. Cole eased off the gas. At first he saw nothing but the storm dragging gray veils across the road. Then 2 shapes appeared inside the snow, small and stubborn and wrong for that distance from town. An old man walked first, bent under a military-style backpack that looked too heavy for his thin body. From the pack hung a dented skillet, 2 saucepans, a battered soup pot, a wire strainer, and what looked like a cast-iron griddle tied on with blue rope. Each step made the metal knock together, a faint, tired music nearly lost under the wind. Behind him came an old woman with a larger pack, so big it rose above her shoulders and made her look as if she were carrying a soft gray boulder. A blanket was rolled and strapped to the top. A framed photograph had been tucked under one cord. Snow clung to the fringe of her wool cap. The old man paused, shifted the weight, and nearly went down on one knee. He caught himself with a sound Cole could not hear through the windshield, but Ranger heard. Something. The dog whined once, low in his throat, and planted a paw on the dashboard. "Easy," Cole said, though his own breathing had changed. He slowed to a crawl. The old man lifted his face toward the pickup, and time, which Cole had once believed could be outrun by discipline, money, war, and distance, stopped in the middle of that road. Harold Reed. It could not be. It was. 24 years had carved him down until the man looked made of sticks, white beard rough against a wind-burned face. Cheeks hollow, eyes set deep but still bright with the same stubborn blue fire that had once stared down 3 drunken men outside a roadside diner because they were pushing a 17-year-old Cole around for sport. Harold Reed had owned that diner then, a low-roofed place called Reed's Hearth, where coffee tasted a little burnt by 9 in the morning, and the pie was good enough to start arguments. Harold had given Cole a job washing dishes when no one else in town trusted the angry boy with a cash register, a broom, or even a decent word. He had fed him without calling it charity. He had let him sleep in the storage room one January night after Cole's father threw him out for the last time. Cole remembered the smell of onions on Harold's apron, Martha Reed humming hymns while stacking plates, and Abigail Reed laughing behind the counter, her brown braids swinging when she turned too fast. Abigail. The name rose inside him with such force that his foot pressed the brake before he knew he had decided to stop. Ranger barked once, sharp, and contained the bark he used when a search target was near but not yet found. Cole pulled to the shoulder, hazard lights blinking red into the storm. He should have opened the door. He should have called Harold's name. Instead, he sat there with his hands locked around the wheel. A retired Navy SEAL who had walked into worse places than this and suddenly could not step onto a snowy road. The old couple did not look toward him again. Pride moved them more than strength now. Harold leaned into the wind, the pans knocking at his back, while Martha followed, with one hand hooked around the strap across her chest and the other pressed against the lower part of her ribs. They looked like people leaving one life with no guarantee of another, carrying only what could not be abandoned. Cole watched them pass the truck and continue down the road, away from town, toward the older cabins scattered near the dark timberline. Ranger twisted, tracking them through the rear window, then turned his head and looked at Cole. The dog did not need words. Their years together had been built on smaller things, a stiffening shoulder, a held breath, the particular silence before an order. Cole put the truck in gear. "All right," he said softly. "We follow." From a distance, Ranger sat, but he did not relax. Cole let the couple stay 2 bends ahead, far enough that they would not feel chased, close enough that if one of them fell, he could reach them. The storm thickened. Twice Harold stopped and pretended to adjust the rope around the pots, while Martha bent forward, hands on knees, breathing hard. Twice Cole nearly pulled beside them. Twice he did not, and each time shame settled heavier in him. A man could train himself to endure cold, hunger, fear, exhaustion. Nobody trained you for seeing someone who once saved you reduced to walking through a mountain storm with kitchen pans tied to his spine. The road narrowed until plows had given up doing more than scraping a single uneven lane. Cole recognized pieces of the area, though not well. He had avoided Telluride for years except when business forced him near it, and even then he came like a thief, fast in, fast out, never staying long enough for memory to climb into the cab beside him. The Reeds had lived closer to town when he knew them. Their diner had stood at the bend below Silver Ridge Resort, catching skiers, truckers, lift mechanics, and locals who wanted soup that came in bowls big enough for both hands. Where was the diner now? Sold, maybe? Closed? Burned? He could not remember hearing. He had made a career out of not hearing. Ranger's nose worked at the cracked window seam, catching the old couple's scent through snow and pine resin and road salt. Cole followed until the couple turned down a lane almost hidden by drifted snow. A mailbox leaned at the entrance, its door hanging open, red flags snapped off. The name Reed had been painted there once. Only the R.E. remained black letters fading under ice. Cole felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with January. At the end of the lane stood a cabin that looked as if winter had been leaning against it for years and had finally grown tired of waiting. The roof sagged slightly over the left side. One window was covered with cloudy plastic taped from inside. A stovepipe pushed through the roof at a crooked angle, breathing a thin ribbon of smoke that the wind tore apart at once. No porch light burned. No tire tracks marked the yard. The place did not look abandoned, which somehow made it worse. It looked endured. Harold reached the door and stood still too long before lowering his pack. The pans slid and clattered into the snow, bright flashes of metal against white. Martha touched his shoulder, and he waved her off with a tenderness that did not fool anyone. Together they dragged the packs inside. The door stuck. Harold pushed his hip against it and disappeared into the dim interior, followed by Martha and the sound of metal scraping on wood. Cole parked behind a wall of spruce where the truck would not be visible from the cabin, though he hated himself for hiding. Ranger stared through the windshield, breath fogging the glass. Cole rubbed his thumb over the steering wheel seam until the leather squeaked. He had spent years becoming a man people called when there was a problem too ugly for polite offices. He knew how to move assets, gather intelligence, calm a panicking board fly across a continent overnight, and get men out of places that had forgotten mercy. Yet here was Harold Reed, old and poor and walking through snow with a kitchen on his back, and Cole's first act was to sit concealed behind trees like a coward with good tires. He told himself he needed information. It was not entirely a lie. If he walked in wearing expensive winter gear and a watch he had forgotten to remove, Harold might shut the door in his face before Cole said hello. Pride had always been Harold's finest and most inconvenient possession. The man could accept help only if it arrived disguised as work barter or a favor he planned to repay twice. Cole remembered being 17 and trying to refuse a plate of stew. Harold had set it on the counter and said, "Fine, don't eat charity. Wash the stock pot after and we'll call it a business arrangement." Cole had eaten 2 bowls. Now the memory hurt enough to make him close his eyes. Ranger shifted closer and pressed his shoulder against Cole's arm. The dog had done that in tents, helicopters, hospitals, and one empty kitchen at 3 in the morning when Cole had learned that another old teammate had given up fighting the war after coming home. Ranger's comfort was never dramatic. He simply arrived and stayed. Cole scratched the dog's neck. "I should have come back," he said. The words fogged the cold cab and vanished. Outside, the cabin door opened again. Martha stepped out with a bucket, moved toward a hand pump near the side of the yard, and struggled with the handle until a reluctant stream of water appeared. Harold came after her, took the bucket and received what looked like a scolding for his trouble. Even through the snow, Cole could tell Martha was angry because she loved him. That kind of anger had a posture. Then Cole saw the paper on the cabin door. He had missed it at first because the wind kept slapping it flat against the weathered boards. Red border, official seal, a notice laminated against snow. He lifted binoculars from the glove compartment, an old habit he never advertised, and focused through the shifting white. He caught only pieces between gusts. Property delinquency vacate 72 hours, county enforcement. His hands went still. The Reeds were not just poor, they were being forced out. Harold had been walking through the storm with pans because those might be all the cooking tools they had left to carry before someone changed the lock. Martha had strapped a house onto her back because the house itself no longer belonged to her in any way that mattered to men with stamps and clipboards. Cole lowered the binoculars slowly. Ranger whined again, this time softer, almost human in its restraint. "I see it," Cole whispered. His voice sounded strange, but not like the man who briefed security teams or negotiated contracts. More like the boy who had once stood behind Reed's diner with split knuckles while Harold told him a man was allowed to be angry, but he was not allowed to let anger choose the road for him. The wind hammered the truck. Cole started the engine, then shut it off again. If he drove to the cabin now, the scene would become about rescue, and Harold would hate that almost as much as he hated needing it. If Cole drove away, he would be doing what he had done for 24 years, calling distance wisdom because it asked less of him than love. He looked at Ranger. Ranger looked back. The dog yawned slow and unimpressed, as if to say that humans made simple work stupid whenever feelings were involved. Cole laughed once under his breath. It came out rough. "Point taken." He pulled out his phone and searched for Evelyn Parker's store. The name surfaced from memory. Parker's Market and postal counter still open, according to the listing 3 miles back toward town. Evelyn had worked the register when Cole was young, her hair red, then her mouth always running, her kindness hidden under gossip and receipt tape. If anyone knew what happened to Harold and Martha Reed, it would be Evelyn. Cole put the truck in reverse and backed carefully out of the spruce cover. As he reached the lane, he glanced one last time toward the cabin. The door had closed. Smoke rose thinly. The red notice snapped in the wind like a small flag of surrender. Cole's jaw tightened. He had left Telluride as a boy running from shame. He had returned as a man with money scars, a loyal dog, and too many locked rooms inside him. The snow kept falling patient and merciless. Behind him the pans were silent now. Ahead the town waited with all the secrets it had buried under white. Cole drove toward it, and for the first time in decades he did not plan to leave before the truth found him. Morning came pale and reluctant, as if the sun itself had looked at the mountains and decided to stay under a blanket. Snow still drifted sideways through Telluride's narrow streets, though the worst of the storm had moved east, leaving behind a town muffled in white and chimney smoke. Cole parked outside Parker's Market and postal counter just after 7 before the ski crowd had begun pretending winter was a game invented for their jackets. Ranger jumped down first, shook snow from his coat, and sneezed with such wounded dignity that Cole said, "Don't start. You love weather drama." The dog ignored him and nosed the air around the door. The market had changed less than Cole expected. Same wooden sign with chipped green letters, same bell above the entrance, same smell of coffee, old pine shelves, newspaper ink, and the faint sweetness of cinnamon rolls kept too long under plastic. For 1 second, Cole was 17 again, standing in that aisle with no money, pretending to study canned soup, while Abigail Reed slipped a sandwich into his jacket pocket and told him not to look grateful because it would ruin her reputation. Then the bell rang behind him, and the memory scattered. A woman behind the counter looked up from sorting mail. She had silver hair now, but the eyes were the same lively brown, sharp enough to slice bread. Evelyn Parker squinted at him over her glasses. "Well," she said slowly, "either my cataracts have started inventing ghosts, or Cole Whitaker finally ran out of places to avoid." Cole had prepared a calm introduction. It died at once. "Morning, Evelyn." Her mouth opened, closed, then pressed into a line that tried to be stern and failed because emotion kept shaking the edges. "You grew shoulders," she said, "and a dog." Ranger sat beside Cole, straight-backed, watching her with professional suspicion. "This is Ranger." "Does Ranger bite? Only bad character." Evelyn leaned on the counter and looked at the dog. "Then half this town better keep its hands to itself." Ranger gave one approving thump of his tail. Cole found himself almost smiling, then remembered why he had come. Evelyn saw the smile vanish. The warmth drained from her face in a way that told him she had already guessed. "You saw them," she said. It was not a question. Cole removed his gloves slowly. "Harold and Martha." Evelyn turned to the mail slots behind her as if the little brass labels might offer a safer conversation. "I wondered how long before winter put them where somebody with eyes couldn't miss them." "What happened?" Cole asked. His voice came out lower than intended. A customer near the coffee machine glanced over, caught Evelyn's look, and suddenly became very interested in stirring his cup. "Not here," she said. "Back room." The back room was cramped with boxes, seed catalogs, returned packages, and the kind of town paperwork nobody trusted the internet to handle. Evelyn closed the door and stood a moment with her hand still on the knob. Ranger settled near the threshold, blocking it without being asked. Cole noticed. So did Evelyn. "Lord," she murmured, "that dog has better manners than most committees." Cole did not rush her. In the teams, silence had weight. In small towns, it had memory. Evelyn finally sat on a crate of paper towels and rubbed both hands over her knees. "Harold Reed used to own half the kindness in this town," she said. Not land, not money. Kindness. People don't know how valuable that is until the person holding it gets ruined. Cole waited. 9 years ago, the storage warehouse at Silver Ridge burned during inventory week. Not the whole resort, thank God, but enough to cost a fortune. Winter equipment, boxed, supplies, fuel records, payroll files, who knows what else. One young maintenance man got caught in the smoke. He lived, but it ended his season and scared his family half to death. Nobody should make light of that. Who blamed Harold? Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the door, a habit learned from too many years of listening for powerful footsteps. Warren Voss first, then Grant, then everybody who owed the Voss family rent, work, credit, or silence. Cole knew the name. Anyone who bought land in San Miguel County knew the Voss name. Silver Ridge Resort had started as a ski lodge and grown into a private kingdom of condos, lifts, event barns, restaurants, and snowcat tours. Warren Voss had money old enough to pretend it was virtue. Grant Voss had the air's polished smile, the sort Cole had seen on men who believed consequences were for employees. Why Harold? Because he was there. Evelyn swallowed. He had a small contract to cook for night crews that season after the diner began struggling. He brought soup, coffee, breakfast burritos, that kind of thing. He had access to the service entrance. The official story was that he set the fire to cover some insurance mess tied to his own debts. They said he wanted attention off his failing business. Cole's fingers curled once, then released. Harold would sooner cut off his hand than hurt people for money. I know. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she blinked hard. A lot of us knew. Knowing and saying are different animals in a town where one family signs half the checks. Ranger raised his head at the tremor in her voice. Evelyn looked at him and gave a short, broken laugh. Don't you judge me, soldier dog. I do enough of that myself. Cole leaned against a shelf of bulk napkins. He saw Harold as he had been, thick forearms dusted with flour, voice rough from coffee and laughter, one hand always ready to steady a wobbling table or a wobbling kid. Was there proof? Enough for rumor, not enough for truth, but rumor is faster, cheaper, and rarely has to apologize. Evelyn reached for a folder on the shelf behind her, hesitated, then pulled it down. The sheriff at the time owed Warren Voss campaign money. The bank held the Reed's diner loan. Silver Ridge stopped sending workers there. Tourists heard whispers. Locals avoided them because shame spreads like smoke, even when the fire is somewhere else. Within a year, the diner was gone. Within 3, Abigail was gone too. Cole looked up sharply. He had known from his own late-night searching after seeing the cabin that Abigail Reed had died, but hearing Evelyn say it placed a hand around his throat. How? He asked. Pneumonia that turned bad. She had been caring for Harold and Martha, taking odd jobs, refusing to leave them. The clinic said she came in too late. Evelyn's voice softened. She was stubborn like both her parents. Sweet as June corn, stubborn as a locked safe. Cole stared at the concrete floor. He remembered Abigail at 19, leaning over the diner counter, telling him that if he ever became famous, she would sell his embarrassing stories to the highest bidder. He had told her he would come back wearing a uniform worth bragging about. She had tapped his chest and said she would rather he came back kind. I wrote to her, Cole said. Evelyn went very still. When I enlisted, I wrote every week at first, then every month. Then after my first deployment, less often, but I wrote. She never answered. Evelyn's face changed, and Cole saw fear there, old fear, the kind stored so long it had become part of the bones. Cole. What? There were letters. The hum of the old refrigerator seemed suddenly loud. What letters? Hers to you, yours to her. I saw some, not all. I worked the postal counter then, same as now, though the route system was different. Abigail came in with envelopes for you. So many at first. Later, not as many, but enough. And there were letters with Navy postmarks addressed to her. Cole pushed away from the shelf. Ranger stood. Why didn't she get them? Evelyn closed her eyes. Some were returned. Some were redirected. Some got held because of address confusion, or that's what I was told. A man from Silver Ridge came around more than once asking about mail for the Reeds, saying the resort's office handled payroll, addresses, and seasonal worker forwarding. I was younger and scared and stupid enough to believe paperwork when it wore a clean coat. Who? Cole asked. He already knew, perhaps. His body knew before his mind did. Evelyn whispered, Grant Voss. The room narrowed. Cole heard nothing for a few seconds except Ranger's breathing. It would have been easy then to become the man people feared in boardrooms, the man whose voice went flat before contracts died. It would have been easy to ask where Grant lived, what he drove, who guarded his gates. Instead, Cole looked at Ranger. The dog looked back, steady and unimpressed by human rage. Cole breathed in 4 counts, held it, let it out. An old battlefield habit, a newer survival habit. Tell me everything, he said. Evelyn nodded, tears now running despite her effort to stop them. I don't have everything, but I kept a box. Don't ask me why. Maybe the Lord kept needling me. Maybe guilt likes paperwork. Returned slips, copies of forms, a few envelopes that fell behind the mail cabinet before the renovation. I told myself for years it was too late to matter. It matters. His voice broke on the second word, barely, but enough that Evelyn looked away to spare him. If she thought I stopped writing, he said, and I thought she stopped writing. He did not finish. There was no clean end to that sentence. It held Abigail's waiting, his leaving, the slow failure of 2 young hearts, misled by silence, and the cold fact that she had died before anyone corrected it. Evelyn reached across the small room and touched his sleeve with 2 fingers, not quite a comfort, not quite a plea. Cole, listen to me. If you're going to dig into the Voss family, you need to know what you're standing in. They are not movie villains twirling mustaches. They're worse. They're respectable. They sponsor scholarships, rebuild church roofs, donate coats in December, and remind everyone exactly who paid for the coats. Warren is old and sick now, but his name still opens doors. Grant runs most of the resort. His sister Lydia does the charity work, and if there's a conscience left in that family, it lives in her and probably pays rent. Did Lydia know about the letters? I don't know. Evelyn wiped her cheeks. She was younger, quieter. Always looked like she was apologizing for rooms she hadn't entered yet. Cole filed that away. He had spent enough years reading rooms to know that ashamed people sometimes carried keys without knowing they were keys. What about Harold's case file? County records, some sealed, some public. The old sheriff retired to Arizona. The maintenance man who survived moved away. Harold tried to fight it first, but lawyer fees ate what little they had. Martha prayed. Abigail worked. The town watched. Then folks got bored of feeling bad and called it settled. Cole looked toward the front of the store, where the bell rang and the customer asked for stamps. Life rude and ordinary continuing. I saw a notice on their door, he said. Evelyn's mouth tightened. Back taxes and lien fees. The cabin belonged to Martha's cousin, then passed messy through family. A developer sniffed around, bought some dead, and now the Reeds have 72 hours. I tried to help. Harold wouldn't take cash. Martha took canned peaches once and made me accept a crocheted pot holder in return. Despite everything, Cole felt a small warmth at that. Sounds like them? Yes. Evelyn stood. But don't you go roaring up there with money in both fists. Harold will freeze solid before he lets pity warm him. I know. Do you? Her tone sharpened. Because the boy I remember was always trying to fix pain by punching the nearest wall. Cole accepted that. The boy you remember found better walls. Ranger sneezed again. Evelyn looked down. and a better friend, apparently. Cole bent to scratch Ranger's shoulder. He outranks me emotionally. Smart dog. Evelyn unlocked a metal cabinet under the sorting table and removed a shoebox wrapped in old twine. She held it against her chest for a moment before handing it over. I should have brought this to them years ago. Why didn't you? The question came out not cruel, but honest. Evelyn flinched anyway. Because if I admitted what I knew, I had to admit what I didn't do. Sometimes cowardice dresses itself up as timing. Cole took the box. It weighed almost nothing. It felt terrible in his hands. I'm going to read these. You should. Then I'm going to talk to Harold and Martha. You should do that too. Evelyn opened the back room door, then stopped. Cole, about Abigail. Don't make her into a ghost that only belongs to your regret. She lived a full life in small pieces. She taught Sunday school. She sang off-key. She once threw a biscuit at Grant Voss because he called her father hired help. Hit him right in the vest. Best thing I ever saw. Cole laughed before he could stop himself, a short sound that broke and healed nothing but helped him breathe. She did. Hard enough to leave flour. The image entered him gently. Abigail, young, fierce, alive, arm cocked with righteous bread. It hurt. It also saved him from making grief too holy to touch. When Cole stepped back into the front of the store, several customers pretended not to have noticed the shoebox in his hands. Small towns were expert at pretending and terrible at mystery. Ranger walked close to his knee. Outside, the snow had thinned to a drifting powder. Cole stood on the porch beneath the market awning and looked toward the mountain road that led back to the cabin. He could go there now. He could say Harold's name, Martha's name, Abigail's name, and open the box between them like a wound. But Evelyn was right. If he arrived with grief before respect, he would only add weight to people already bent under too much. He needed a reason to stand beside them that did not feel like charity. Work. A contract. Something Harold could argue with and still sign. Cole thought of the land meeting, the center he had not yet fully believed in. The kitchen. It would need the veterans who would come there pretending they only wanted jobs, fresh air, or quiet rooms, when what they really wanted was permission to be unfinished. Harold and Martha could feed such men. They had fed one once. He looked down at Ranger. We're buying the land, he said. Ranger wagged his tail once as if this had been obvious for hours. Cole tucked the shoebox under his arm and descended the steps. Across the street, a black SUV rolled slowly past windows, tinted tires whispering through slush. It did not stop. It did not need to. Cole felt the old sense of being watched settle between his shoulders. Ranger turned his head and tracked the vehicle until it disappeared around the corner toward Silver Ridge. Cole's hand tightened on the shoebox. The town had started speaking. Now the powerful would start listening. And somewhere up the mountain, behind a red notice on a cabin door, Harold and Martha Reed were still packing their life into bags while the truth waited in a box that smelled faintly of dust paper and lost years. The afternoon light over Telluride turned the snowfields blue, then silver, then the color of old bone as clouds folded back over the peaks. Cole sat in the rented office above a closed ski repair shop with Evelyn's shoebox open on the desk and Ranger asleep against the door. He had chosen the office because it had 2 exits, clear sight lines to the street, and a landlord who cared more about 3 months paid in advance than questions. Old habits. Useful ones. The box held fewer letters than Cole had feared, and more than he could bear. Some were his, returned with stamps that said no forwarding address or addressee unknown, though he knew the diner had stood in the same place for years after he left. Some were Abigail's, never delivered. Their envelopes, yellowed corners softened by time, his name written in the round, confident hand he remembered from order tickets and birthday cards. He did not open them at first. He arranged them by date because order was easier than grief. Ranger opened one eye every time Cole's breathing changed. "Don't start," Cole said. "I'm categorizing." Ranger thumped his tail without lifting his head. Cole opened the earliest letter from Abigail. It began, "Dear Cole, Martha says if you come back with a shaved head, I am allowed to laugh only once, but I told her I am saving all my laughing for when you pretend not to miss my pancakes." Cole lowered the page. The room blurred. He pressed thumb and forefinger hard against his eyes until the tears retreated enough to become pain he could use. He read for hours. Abigail wrote about the diner, Harold's bad knee, Martha's choir practice, a stray orange cat that kept stealing bacon, and the way the mountains looked purple before storms. She wrote about missing him without begging. She wrote about being proud of him without worshiping the uniform. Later letters changed. The humor stayed, but worry entered like cold air under a door. She mentioned that Silver Ridge had delayed payments to Harold. She mentioned Grant Voss coming by too often, acting friendly in a way she did not trust. She wrote that some of Cole's letters arrived opened, then none arrived at all. One letter stopped him completely. It had been written 19 months after he enlisted. Abigail had said, "I don't know if you are choosing silence or if silence is being chosen for us, but I need you to know I waited, honestly. I will not hate you if your life has gone farther than this town. I only hope you are safe and still kind." Cole placed that letter flat on the desk and stared at it until the words settled into him like snow on a grave. Safe and still kind. He had become the first in a technical sense. The second remained under review. Near dusk, he drove to the county records office, leaving Ranger in the truck, only because the clerk at the front desk looked ready to faint at the sight of a German shepherd in a government building. Cole returned to the pickup twice to check on him. Ranger looked insulted both times. Inside, Cole moved through forms with the calm persistence of a man who had learned that paperwork was just another locked door, and locked doors liked people who did not shout. He requested public records tied to the Silver Ridge warehouse fire property liens connected to the Reed Cabin tax delinquency notices and any civil filings involving Harold Reed. The clerk, a narrow man named Dennis with a holiday tie and the nervous smile of someone who had spent years saying no to the wrong people, began by explaining processing delays. Cole listened, nodded, and placed his business card on the counter. The card did not say much. Whitaker, Strategic Risk, Denver, and Remote Operations. It did not need to. Dennis looked at it, Cole, and found several files that could be copied before closing. "Some documents are archived," Dennis said. "Some may require formal legal request. Then I'll make one. That could take time. I have time." Dennis studied him as if nobody with that kind of watch ever truly did. Cole removed the watch and put it in his pocket. "I have time," he repeated. Something in Dennis softened. The first file gave Cole the official shape of the accusation. 9 years earlier, Silver Ridge Resort reported a warehouse fire that damaged equipment and destroyed financial records. Harold Reed, then 67, had been contracted to provide overnight meals for maintenance crews. He had been seen near the warehouse service entrance at 10:40 p.m. According to the resort, accelerant traces were found near a rear storage bay where Harold had access. No criminal conviction appeared in the file, a detail that mattered. The case had stalled, then dissolved into civil pressure, insurance claims, and public accusation. Harold had never been found guilty in court. He had been found guilty in conversation, which, in Telluride, had cost him nearly as much. Cole copied witness lists. A maintenance worker named Luis Ortega had suffered smoke exposure and later moved to Pueblo. A security contractor named Grant Voss had signed a statement saying Harold had argued with management over payment. Warren Voss had submitted a letter describing Harold as financially desperate. Abigail Reed had submitted a handwritten statement defending her father, but it was marked unsupported family testimony. Cole read that phrase 3 times. unsupported family testimony, as if love made truth less true. Back in the pickup, Ranger sniffed the folder and sneezed. "Agreed," Cole said. "Smells like legal rot." He drove toward the old diner site, though he did not decide to until he found himself turning there. Reed's Hearth was gone. In its place stood a boutique gear rental shop selling insulated adventure packages to visitors who wanted wilderness with a waiver. The roofline had changed, the windows enlarged, the parking lot repaved, but behind the building near the service alley, one brick wall remained from the original structure, painted beige but not replaced. Cole got out and stood before it as snow whispered against his shoulders. He remembered Harold leaning there after closing, smoking a cigarette Martha did not know about, and telling Cole that anger was a poor man's whiskey, cheap, hot, and likely to leave you sick in the morning. Cole had pretended not to listen. He had listened to every word. Ranger circled the alley, nose low, then returned with a crushed paper cup in his mouth, proud as if he had found ancient treasure. Cole took it. "You know we're investigating a 9-year-old fire, not litter." Ranger wagged once. The absurdity helped. Cole needed absurdity. Without it, the past became a room with no air. At Parker's Market, Evelyn was closing when Cole arrived. She saw the file under his arm and locked the door behind the last customer. "You found the public version?" she said. "It's neat, isn't it? Bad men love neat stories." Harold was never convicted. No. But Warren Voss did not need a judge. He had breakfast tables. Cole spread copies on the counter. Evelyn removed her glasses, wiped them, put them back on, and leaned close. When she saw Abigail's statement, her mouth trembled. "She wrote that at my kitchen table. Said if she wrote clean enough, maybe somebody would believe her." "Who saw Grant near the mail?" Cole asked. Evelyn stiffened. "I did. Maybe others. Old route driver named Mel. He's dead now. There was also Lydia Voss, once. She came in with Grant, and I remember her looking at the returned envelopes like she wanted to ask a question but had been trained not to." "Where is Lydia now?" "Still at Silver Ridge. Runs the foundation, charity dinners, employee hardship fund. People say she's kind. People also said Harold was guilty, so I don't let people say too much without receipts anymore." Cole almost smiled. Evelyn caught it. "Don't look at me like I've become wise. I got older. Wisdom is what you call cowardice after it starts paying penance." Evelyn made coffee and burned it slightly, which made the store smell so much like Reed's Hearth that Cole had to sit down. She noticed, but did not soften the moment with pity. "Tell me what you need. Names. Anyone who worked at Silver Ridge then. Anyone who still dislikes Grant enough to talk. Anyone who loved Abigail enough to remember things properly." Evelyn nodded. "That last list is longer than you think. Folks failed her, but failing a person doesn't mean they didn't love her. It just means they loved comfort more." Cole wrote that down without meaning to. Evelyn looked at the notepad. "Quoting me? Maybe. Then fix my grammar? No." For the first time all day, she laughed fully. Ranger lifted his head from the floor, looked between them, and sighed as if humans had finally learned a basic trick. The laugh faded, but it left the room warmer. Cole spent the next day following names. He found a retired lift mechanic who remembered Harold entering the warehouse with soup, then later being pulled outside coughing and dazed, not running away. He found a former housekeeper who said Grant had been under pressure over missing inventory funds that winter. He found the address of Luis Ortega in Pueblo and left a careful voicemail that did not mention accusation, only that new questions had come up about the Silver Ridge incident, and Luis's memory could help clear an innocent man. He also called a former federal investigator who had once contracted with Whitaker Strategic Risk. Her name was Dana Lyle, and she had a gift for finding financial footprints men thought they had swept behind them. 9-year-old resort fire, possible fraud, small-town pressure, Dana said over the phone. "You do know how to pick relaxing hobbies." "I'm serious." "You always are. That's why you need hobbies. Can you look? Send me documents. Already encrypted. Of course they are. How's Ranger? At the sound of his name, Ranger barked once. Dana laughed. Tell the old professional I respect him more than you. Everyone does. Healthy consensus. That evening, Cole finally drove back toward the Reed cabin. He carried no cash, no grand offer. Only a thermos of soup from Parker's Market, 2 bags of dog food as an excuse because Evelyn had told him Harold once fed every stray in the valley, and a work proposal drafted in plain language. The snow had hardened into a crust that crunched under his boots. The red notice still slapped against the cabin door. Cole knocked. Inside, movement stopped. A chair scraped. The door opened 3 inches, then wider. Harold Reed stood in the gap wearing a sweater patched at both elbows, his beard damp from the cold, his eyes narrowing as they took in Cole's face. Recognition did not arrive as shock. It arrived as a tired closing of the mouth, as if Harold had always known the past would turn up one day and choose an inconvenient hour. Cole Whitaker, he said. His voice was thinner, but still had gravel in it. You got old. Cole swallowed. So did you. From inside, Martha said, Harold Reed, don't be rude to company when the Lord can hear you. Harold kept looking at Cole. The Lord's heard worse from me. Ranger stepped forward slow and respectful and sat at the threshold without crossing it. Harold looked down at the dog. The dog looked back. Something passed between 2 veterans of different wars, and Harold's expression shifted by the width of a match flame. I don't want charity, Harold said before Cole could speak. I didn't bring any. Cole held up the thermos. Soup. Evelyn made too much. Evelyn never made too much of anything by accident. No. And the dog food, Ranger wanted to make a donation. Ranger wagged at his cue. Harold tried not to smile. Failed. Barely. Martha appeared behind him, smaller than Cole remembered, but with the same clear eyes, the same white hair now pinned under a knitted cap. She looked at Cole's face, and for one dangerous second he saw Abigail in the tilt of her head. You came back, she said, not accusation, not welcome. A fact set carefully on the table. Cole removed his cap. Snow melted in his hair. Too late, he said, but yes. Martha's lips pressed together. Harold looked past Cole toward the truck, the road, the darkening trees. Late is still a direction, he said, if a man knows which way he's walking. He stepped back. Come in before you let all the cold in. Dog too. If he knows not to eat my dinner. Ranger entered first, inspected the room, and immediately placed himself near the old wood stove, as if assigned to guard it. Cole followed into the cabin, ducking under the low doorframe. The room smelled of smoke, damp wool, boiled potatoes, and a faint metallic tang from the pans stacked near the wall. On the table lay one of Abigail's old photographs, the glass cracked across her smiling face. Cole saw it and stopped breathing. Martha noticed. We still set her where she can hear us, she said softly. Some folks set flowers. We set conversation. Cole nodded because he did not trust his voice. Harold gestured toward a chair. Sit then. Tell me why a boy who ran off to become dangerous is standing in my kitchen with soup he didn't cook. Cole sat. The chair wobbled. Ranger's ears twitched. Cole placed the work proposal on the table but did not push it forward yet. I saw you yesterday. Harold's face hardened. A lot of people see. I should have stopped, maybe, maybe not. Pride and hypothermia both make fools of men. Martha clicked her tongue. Harold. It's true. Cole accepted the rebuke and the truth together. I went to Evelyn. I know some of what happened, not enough. I want to understand. Harold leaned back, arms folded, each movement carrying fatigue he tried to hide. Understand what? That folks believed what they wanted because it was easier. That Warren Voss pointed, and the town looked where he pointed. That my daughter wore herself thin trying to keep two old people fed after everyone decided our name smelled like smoke. The last words cracked despite his effort. Martha put one hand over his. Cole looked down at the proposal. It suddenly seemed too clean for the room. I wrote to Abigail, Cole said. Martha's hand tightened over Harold's. The stove popped. I wrote. I thought she chose not to answer. I was proud, then angry, then busy, then ashamed of how long I had waited. Evelyn had some letters, mine and hers. They were intercepted or misdirected. I don't know how far it goes yet. Harold's face went dangerously still. Martha sat down slowly as if her knees had received news before the rest of her. She said that, Martha whispered. Near the end. She said maybe the mail had lost its way. I told her not to build hope out of bad roads. Cole closed his eyes for a beat. I'm sorry. Harold's chair scraped back. For a moment, Cole thought the old man would order him out. Instead, Harold walked to the counter, braced both hands on it, and bowed his head. His shoulders moved once. Not a sob, exactly, something smaller and worse. Martha did not go to him. Perhaps she knew the dignity of letting a man face the wall when his heart gave way. Ranger Rose crossed the room and sat beside Harold without touching him. Harold looked down. The old man's hand lowered slowly and rested on Ranger's head. Good dog, he said hoarsely. Ranger accepted the praise like a medal. Only then did Cole slide the paper across the table. I am buying land below the ridge for a veterans recovery center. It needs a kitchen. Not catering, a real kitchen. Breakfast before group work, soup after hard days, coffee strong enough to argue with. I want to hire you and Martha to run it. Harold turned from the counter. There it is. It is paid work with housing attached during setup, medical coverage and written terms. You can have a lawyer read it. You can tell me no. You can tell me my soup is bad even though Evelyn made it. Martha reached for the paper before Harold could refuse on reflex. Her eyes moved across the lines. This is generous. It is fair. Those are cousins, not twins, Harold said. Cole nodded. Then negotiate. Harold stared at him. The old spark returned, faint but alive. You always were mouthy when scared. Cole almost smiled. Yes, sir. Outside, a gust struck the cabin hard enough to rattle the plastic window. The red notice snapped against the door. Martha looked at it, then at the contract, then at Harold. Something like hope moved across her face, and because it was small, it was almost unbearable. Harold saw it too. His jaw worked. I'll read it, he said. That's all I'm promising. That's enough, Cole answered. But as he spoke, Ranger turned sharply toward the stack of pans by the wall. His nose lifted. A low growl rolled through his chest, not aimed at any person in the room. He walked to the dented cast-iron skillet tied with blue rope, sniffed the blackened rim, and began to paw gently at it. Harold frowned. That's an old pan from the night of the fire. Martha made me keep it, said the truth sticks to what survives. Cole's body went still. Ranger pawed again, then looked back at him with eyes bright and certain. Cole rose slowly. Whatever had happened at Silver Ridge, some part of it had followed Harold Reed home in the shape of a ruined pan. And Ranger had just found the first scent the town had missed. The next morning arrived with a cold so clean it seemed to ring against the windows. Telluride lay under a hard blue sky, every roof loaded with snow, every breath turning white and vanishing, as if the air itself kept secrets only briefly. Cole returned to the Reed cabin after breakfast with evidence bags, a small digital camera, and the careful manner of a man entering sacred ground with muddy boots. He had asked permission the night before to examine the pan, and Harold had made him ask twice, partly from pride and partly because old men who have lost too much learn to make even help knock before entering. Martha opened the door with a shawl around her shoulders and a warning already loaded in her eyes. If this turns into one of those television scenes where someone waves a flashlight and claims a miracle in 6 minutes, I will put you outside with the woodpile. Cole lifted both hands. No miracles. Chain of custody photos, independent lab. That sounds less dramatic. Good. Ranger pushed his head around Cole's leg and looked up at Martha with solemn affection. She softened, despite herself. You may come in, Sergeant Nose. Ranger stepped inside as if promoted. Harold sat near the stove, the old cast-iron skillet on the table before him. Its rim was warped, one side darkened by heat, blue rope still looped through the handle from the day Cole had seen it tied against Harold's backpack. It was only a pan. It was also a witness that had waited 9 winters for someone to listen. Cole photographed it from every angle. He did not scrape it, did not touch the blackened rim without gloves, did not let excitement run ahead of procedure. Ranger sat close, nose working, tail still. Harold watched him. He always like that? When he has something. And what does he have? Cole looked at the pan, then at Harold. I don't know yet. He reacted to a petroleum odor. Could be old cooking fuel. Could be something from the warehouse. Could be nothing. Martha snorted. Men say could be nothing when they're afraid Hope might hear them. Cole accepted that, too. Then let's say it could be something, but something still has to survive a lab and a lawyer. Harold leaned back, coughing into a cloth, not violently, not in a way Cole would later describe for pity, just a weary cough from years of cold rooms and stubborn lungs. Martha's eyes followed the cloth with a fear she tried to make ordinary. Cole saw it. He had seen spouses in hospitals do that, pretend a breath was just a breath while counting every one. I also brought the revised contract, he said, giving Harold a safer subject. Evelyn found a retired attorney in Montrose willing to review it for you at my expense, but the invoice goes to the project, not me personally. You can reject any clause. Harold gave him a dry look. You always talk this much now? Only when nervous. Then you must be terrified. Martha laughed first, a bright, sudden sound that startled even her. Ranger wagged hard enough to thump the chair leg. The laugh loosened the room. Cole placed the new contract on the table and slid it toward Harold. It includes a signing bonus for equipment restoration, not personal assistance. The center needs cookware. You own cookware. Some of it has survived combat with soup. I respect that. Harold eyed the stack of pans near the wall. You want to buy my beat-up kitchen? Lease it if you prefer, with maintenance. Maintenance for pans? I run a security company. We maintain things that complain less. Martha covered her smile with a hand. Harold looked irritated, which in his case meant dangerously close to moved. I'll let the lawyer read it. Good. Still not saying yes. Also good. Cole took out a separate folder. There is another thing. The property notice gives you 72 hours, but the lien transfer has procedural problems. I asked an attorney to file for a temporary stay based on improper notification during severe weather and unclear ownership chain. That doesn't erase the debt. It gives time. Harold's face closed. I said no charity. This is legal defense connected to employment housing. If you take the kitchen contract, I need my future kitchen team alive and not displaced while we negotiate. Martha looked at Harold with triumph disguised as innocence. Sounds like business, dear. Harold muttered something about lawyers being coyotes in better shoes. After lunch, Cole drove the skillet to a lab courier in Montrose, while Ranger remained in the truck, glaring at every delay. The route cut along white ridges and frozen gullies beautiful enough to make tourists whisper and dangerous enough to punish admiration. Cole used the drive to call Dana Lyle. She had already started tracing Silver Ridge's financials from the year of the fire through public filings, insurance claims, contractor liens, and old vendor disputes. "Your resort heir had money problems," Dana said without greeting. "Good afternoon to you, too." Grant Voss had personal guarantees on a private development loan outside the resort. Bad timing, bad terms, very quiet. Around the warehouse fire, several internal accounting gaps disappeared into an insurance claim. Not proof, but it rhymes. "Send me everything." "Already did. Also, the warehouse stored paper files that would have mattered in an audit." "Convenient." "Convenience is guilt's favorite cologne." Cole glanced at Ranger. "Dana, if we get physical residue from an item tied to Harold, can you connect it to Silver Ridge fuel inventory?" "Maybe. Need records." "They burned." "Records burn. Vendors invoice. Trucks deliver. People gossip. Don't insult my hobbies." She hung up before he could thank her. Cole almost smiled. He had built his company with people who understood that truth rarely came wearing a name tag. Sometimes it came as an invoice, a smell, a frightened sister, or a pan no one had thrown away. When he returned to town, a black SUV waited outside the ski repair office. Grant Voss leaned against it in a charcoal coat that probably cost more than the Reed cabin's monthly lien fee. He was handsome in the manufactured way of men who had always been photographed from their preferred side. His smile appeared before warmth had approved it. "Mr. Whitaker," he called. "Or should I say Commander? I hear you dislike titles." Cole stepped from the truck. Ranger followed, calm and silent. Grant's eyes moved to the dog, then back to Cole. "Impressive animal." "He thinks so." "I wanted to introduce myself. Grant Voss, Silver Ridge." "I know." Grant's smile thinned. "Then you know my family has deep roots here. We care about this community." Cole looked at the SUV, the polished boots, the watch peeking from Grant's cuff. "Communities notice who cares when the weather is bad." A flicker crossed Grant's face. "I understand you've been asking questions about an unfortunate incident long resolved." "Long past, not resolved." Grant gave a small laugh. "That's a lawyer's distinction." "It's a truth distinction." Ranger sat without command squarely between them. Grant noticed. Most men did. "Look," Grant said, lowering his voice as if offering reason. "I sympathize with Harold and Martha, truly. They're old proud and things got away from them. But reopening painful history can hurt people who have already suffered enough." Cole said nothing. Grant continued, filling silence because men like him often mistook silence for invitation. "My father is not well. Warren built half this valley. A public spectacle now would be cruel. If the Reeds need assistance, there are private ways to handle that with dignity. Quiet settlements, housing, medical bills, everyone can move forward." Cole watched snow slide from the awning behind Grant in a soft white sheet. "Everyone," Grant's jaw tightened. "You know what I mean." "I don't. Mr. Whitaker, you come from a world of force. Mine is relationships. You may be used to solving problems by applying pressure, but mountain towns are delicate ecosystems." Cole looked down at Ranger. "He called us delicate." Ranger yawned. Grant's smile vanished for a half a second, then returned colder. "I'm advising restraint." "Noted. And if restraint is ignored?" Cole asked. Grant stepped closer. Not enough to threaten, enough to test. Ranger stood at once. Cole did not move. The dog did not growl. He did not need to. Grant stepped back. "Then old wounds may open in ways nobody controls. Wounds don't heal because you hide them under snow," Cole said. "They just wait for spring." Grant left with tires whispering over packed ice. Cole watched until the SUV disappeared, then went upstairs to his office. On the desk lay a new envelope pushed under the door, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of an old newspaper clipping. Local cook questioned after Silver Ridge fire. Someone had circled Harold's face in red pen and written, "Some names stay dirty." Cole's first impulse was not fear. It was an old, bright anger. Ranger sensed it and nudged his knee hard enough to make him stumble. "Okay," Cole said. "I hear you." He photographed the envelope, bagged it, and called the sheriff's office to report harassment without expecting much. Then he called the attorney handling the Reed's stay. Then he called Evelyn. "Grant just paid me a visit," he said. "Of course he did. That man can smell accountability from 3 counties away." "Any idea who would leave a clipping?" "Half the cowards in town own red pens." "Helpful. I'm not done. Bring it by later." Paper has habits. People buy their meanness locally. Cole almost laughed. Evelyn's gift was making investigations sound like church gossip with fingerprints. That evening he returned to the Reeds not with the threat letter, but with groceries labeled as supplies for recipe testing. Martha saw through it instantly and accepted because the invoice had the center's name at the top. Harold read the contract with a magnifying glass, pausing to challenge phrases like operational flexibility and mutually agreed schedule. Cole answered every question. Ranger lay under the table and occasionally placed his chin on Harold's boot. It was hard for a man to stay entirely defensive with 70 pounds of loyal warmth choosing his foot as headquarters. At one point, Martha set a pot of beans on the stove and said, "Abigail always believed you would do something loud with your life." Cole looked at her. "Did she?" "She said some men are born with thunder in them and spend years mistaking it for anger." Harold stared at the contract as if it had become very blurry. Cole did not speak. Martha stirred the beans. "She was wrong about plenty." She thought raisins belonged in bread pudding. But not about that. Cole swallowed. "I wish I had come back." Harold turned a page. "Wishing is weather. Coming back is boots." It was not forgiveness. It was not rejection. It was a plank across deep water, narrow but real. Before Cole left, Martha wrapped 2 biscuits in cloth for him and 1 plain biscuit for Ranger. "No butter for dogs," she said. Ranger accepted this injustice with visible sorrow. Harold followed Cole to the door, the cold air cutting between them. "If that pan says what your dog thinks it says, what happens?" Cole looked toward the trees, dark against the snow. "We build a case, carefully. Lab results, financial records, witness statements, no shortcuts. Powerful men don't usually trip over careful. They do if enough careful is stacked in the right place." Harold studied him. "You sound like a patient man. That new, expensive lesson. War, some. Ranger, mostly regret." Harold's expression softened and hardened at the same time. "Regret can teach if a man doesn't turn it into a shrine." Cole nodded. He deserved that. As he walked to the truck, the porch light flickered once and died. Inside the cabin, Martha muttered about the wiring. Harold cursed the breaker. Cole looked at the sagging roof, the plastic window, the notice still nailed to the door despite the legal stay now in motion. This house was not safe. Not for winter, not for old lungs, not for memories already carrying smoke. He would need a way to get them out without stealing their pride. Behind him, Ranger stopped suddenly, nose lifted toward the road. Far below, headlights paused between trees, then vanished. Someone was watching the cabin. Cole opened the truck door and let Ranger in, his face calm, his pulse steady. The past had noticed him. Good. He had finally noticed it back. The storm returned 3 days later. Not as a dramatic wall, but as a patient accumulation, flake upon flake, mile upon mile, until every sound in the valley seemed wrapped in cotton. Cole woke before sunrise in the small house he had rented near the old mining road, his hand already reaching for the pistol he no longer kept by the bed. Empty table, dark window, Ranger breathing at the foot of the mattress. The dream had been one of the old ones, all radio static and white light, but it faded faster than usual because the present had enough trouble to claim him. Dana's preliminary memo sat open on his laptop. The lab had not yet completed analysis on the skillet, but its first note confirmed trace petroleum compounds inconsistent with ordinary kitchen use. Not proof. A door. Dana had also found a pattern of missing vendor payments from Silver Ridge in the months before the warehouse fire, followed by an insurance settlement large enough to cover several embarrassing gaps. Cole read the memo twice, then closed it. Ranger opened one eye. "Don't give me that look," Cole said. "I slept 4 hours. That's practically leisure." Ranger groaned and rolled onto his side. The dog had fought beside him through worse mornings and still considered Cole's sleep habits unprofessional. By 8, Cole was at the county building with the Reed attorney, a compact woman named Marisol Kent, who wore snow boots with a navy suit and had the serene expression of someone who enjoyed making aggressive men explain themselves in writing. The temporary stay on the cabin eviction had been granted for 30 days, because the notice had been posted during severe weather, and the ownership chain behind the lien was, in Marisol's words, a bowl of spaghetti wearing a hat. Cole did not ask what kind of hat. He simply paid the project retainer and made sure the invoice named the Veterans Center, not Harold and Martha personally. Marisol noticed. "You're preserving dignity." "Trying. Try harder when they get angry. Proud clients are usually scared clients with better posture." Cole liked her immediately. They reviewed the employment and housing contract for the center, adjusting language so Harold and Martha would be paid as founding kitchen managers, not beneficiaries. Marisol added clauses guaranteeing independent counsel, flexible health accommodations, and the Reeds' right to leave with their equipment if the project failed. "Old people have been promised enough clouds," she said. "Put ground under it." Cole signed every revision. The land purchase closed that afternoon. It was a former horse property below the ridge, 30 acres of pasture, 2 barns, 1 long ranch house, a commercial well, and a view of the peaks so clean it made even Cole stand still. Snow covered the fences in white sleeves, the barns needed work, the kitchen needed rebuilding, the plumbing sounded like it had opinions. But the bones were solid. Ranger leapt from the truck and ran a wide circle through the yard, nose down, tail high, suddenly looking younger. Cole watched him and felt something in his chest loosen. This place could hold men who woke at night with their hearts sprinting. It could hold women who had come home from service and found their families speaking too loudly or too gently. It could hold old cooks with wounded names. It could maybe hold Cole, though he did not trust that thought long enough to sit beside it. Evelyn arrived in her station wagon with coffee, a measuring tape, and a bag of donuts she called architectural encouragement. She walked through the ranch house kitchen, sniffed, and said, "This room has made bad soup. We can heal that." "That's the plan." "No, Mr. Fancy Security, that is the ministry. The plan is wiring vent hood permits and convincing Harold that accepting wages is not a moral collapse." Cole brought Harold and Martha to see the property the next morning. He expected resistance. He got silence, which was worse. Harold stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand on the frame, looking at the long counters, the old gas range, the window over the sink facing the pasture. Martha walked to that window and touched the sill. Outside, Ranger nosed through snow near the barn, sending powder into the air. "Abigail would have liked this light," Martha said. Harold swallowed and pretended to inspect the ceiling. "Roof doesn't sag." "High praise," Cole said. Harold shot him a look, then kept walking. In the pantry he tested shelves, In the dining room, he counted chairs. In the back hall, he found a cracked tile and tapped it with his boot. Trip hazard. Cole wrote it down. Fixing it. You writing everything I say? Only the brilliant parts. Martha smiled toward the sink. Harold muttered, Then save paper. But his hand lingered on the range. Cole saw it. So did Martha. So did Ranger, who chose that moment to trot in carrying an old work glove he had found in the barn, presenting it to Harold as if hiring him personally. Harold took the glove. This dog has no shame. No, Cole said, but he has excellent judgment. The agreement was not signed that day. Harold insisted on taking the papers home, sleeping on them, arguing with Martha, arguing with God, and arguing with the memory of his own father, who apparently had strong views on payroll despite being dead 40 years. Cole agreed to all of it. But before leaving, Martha asked if she could test the stove once. Evelyn, who had followed in her car because subtlety had never survived her personality, produced onions, potatoes, carrots, chicken flour, and a dented ladle from nowhere. For inspection, she said. Within an hour, the ranch house smelled alive. Harold tried to remain aloof, then corrected Cole's chopping technique with such offended urgency that Ranger barked at him to calm down. Martha laughed until she had to sit. For lunch, they ate stew at a folding table, while snow brightened the windows. It was not healing. Healing was too large a word. It was one warm meal on one hard day. Cole had learned to respect the size of such things. Harold ate quietly, then set down his spoon. If I take this work, I take it because the kitchen needs us, yes, not because you owe Abigail. Cole felt the name land between them. I do owe her, but that can't be your burden. Harold studied him. Good answer. Might even be true. Martha passed biscuits before the silence could become a wall. Late that afternoon, Cole received a call from Dana. He stepped onto the porch, pulling his coat tight against the wind. Talk to me. Lab preliminary on the skillet is interesting, she said. Trace compounds match a winter-grade industrial fuel blend used in snow maintenance equipment, not standard camp fuel or kitchen accelerant. I got vendor data from a supplier Silver Ridge used 9 years ago. Same blend, same season. Cole looked toward the barn where Ranger was teaching Evelyn that throwing a stick once created a lifetime obligation. How strong? Not courtroom strong alone. Strong enough to keep digging. Also, I found a Shell LLC that purchased distressed local debt 2 months ago, including liens tied to the Reed cabin. Let me guess. Registered agent connects to a property firm used by Silver Ridge Expansions. Cole closed his eyes. Grant, maybe Warren, maybe some assistant named Chad with a tragic vest. But yes, Voss Orbit. They're trying to take the cabin. Or pressure the Reeds out before someone gets nostalgic with evidence. Cole thanked her and ended the call. When he turned, Harold stood in the doorway. Bad news, useful news. Same thing half the time. Cole told him about the fuel blend and the lean. He left out speculation. Harold listened without surprise, which hurt more than anger would have. Warren always did like owning the ground under a man's feet, he said. The first public ripple came that evening at Parker's Market. Evelyn, unable to keep quiet once silence had begun tasting like rust, mentioned to 3 customers that the Reed's eviction had been legally paused and that old questions about Silver Ridge were being reviewed by attorneys. By supper, the town had improved the story in 12 directions. By morning, someone had written "Reed liar" in the snowbank near the cabin lane. Cole found Harold already shoveling it away. Each stroke controlled Martha standing behind him with her jaw set. Cole parked, got out, and said nothing. Ranger walked to the snowbank, sniffed the letters, then lifted his head toward tire tracks near the road. Cole photographed everything before Harold erased it completely. Kids, Harold said. Maybe. Don't make it bigger than it is. Someone came here at night to frighten 2 old people. Harold jabbed the shovel into snow. We have been frightened by professionals. This was sloppy. Martha's eyes flashed. Harold Reed, fear does not become noble just because you insult its handwriting. Cole looked at her with admiration. Harold looked caught. Ranger sneezed into the snowbank, which ended the argument by making Martha laugh despite herself. Cole arranged for discreet cameras along the public approach to the lane, placed legally on neighboring land, with permission from an old rancher Evelyn recruited through a pie-based negotiation. He did not hide this from Harold. "No spying on your house," Cole said. "Only the road." "You ask permission from everyone this much?" Harold asked. "Trying a new lifestyle?" "How's it feel?" "Slow. Slow keeps fools alive." That afternoon, the Reeds signed the kitchen contract at Marisol's office. Harold wore his best shirt frayed at the collar. Martha wore a small brooch shaped like a dove. Cole signed last as project director. Evelyn cried openly and claimed it was allergies from legal dust. Ranger, allowed into the office after Marisol declared him better behaved than most plaintiffs, rested his head on Harold's knee during the final page. Harold placed one hand on the dog's head and signed with the other. It was done. Not solved. Done enough for the next step. The next week became a rhythm of building and pressure. Contractors inspected the ranch house. Evelyn organized donated chairs while insisting they were not charity but community inventory with feelings. Martha began planning menus for veterans she had not met yet, asking Cole careful questions about dietary restrictions and whether some men preferred sitting with their backs to walls. Cole looked at her across the kitchen table, startled. "Yes," she nodded. "You always did." Harold sharpened knives with ceremonial seriousness and made a list of equipment demands that included good stockpots, heavy sheet pans, a quiet dishwasher, and coffee mugs that did not look like an apology. Cole approved all of it. Meanwhile, Grant Voss's lawyer sent a letter accusing Cole of harassing a respected local family and attempting to interfere with lawful property matters. Marisol read it, smiled like a winter sunrise, and drafted a response that made Cole grateful she was. The YouTube-safe version of trouble, if anyone had asked Cole, was this: no one exploded, no one bled, no one chased anyone through alleys. The harm came through paper whispers, locked doors, polite threats, and the slow pressure of powerful people hoping old folks would grow too tired to stand. That was how civilized cruelty worked. It worked alone. It said with respect. It scheduled meetings, and because of that, Cole became more careful, not less. He kept evidence logs. He checked on Harold's health without announcing he was checking. He let Martha refuse help 3 times before offering the same thing under a better name. He listened when Evelyn talked too much, because inside the talk were details. He let Ranger lead when the dog showed interest in old items from the night of the fire. One evening, Ranger nosed through a box Harold had brought from the cabin and pulled out a scorched scrap of canvas. Harold said it had come from the apron he wore that night at Silver Ridge. Ranger sniffed sad and looked at Cole with the same bright certainty he had shown over the skillet. Another piece. Another scent. 2 days later, Dana called again. "I found Luis Ortega." Cole stepped outside the ranch kitchen, where Martha was teaching Evelyn the difference between chopping and attacking celery. "Is he willing to talk?" "Carefully. He remembers Harold pulling him toward an exit after smoke alarms started. He also remembers hearing an argument earlier that night between Grant and someone from accounting. He never put it in his statement because the resort's lawyer interviewed him while his family was worried about medical bills and his job." Cole watched snow slide from the barn roof. "Can he sign an affidavit?" "Maybe. He wants assurance this won't become a circus. Tell him we want truth, not spectacle." "That's what I said. Less poetically." Cole ended the call and stood in the cold long enough for Ranger to come find him. The dog leaned against his leg. Through the kitchen window, Harold was showing Martha where he wanted the big stove moved, and she was ignoring him with practiced devotion. For the first time, Cole let himself imagine the room full of veterans eating soup, Harold complaining about weak coffee, Martha remembering names, Ranger under a table collecting dropped biscuits by illegal means. Then headlights appeared at the far gate, a black SUV. Grant stepped out with another man in a suit. Cole did not move. Ranger's body tightened beside him. The next pressure had arrived, wearing polished shoes. The afternoon had the hard shine that comes after snow has stopped falling, but winter has not stopped thinking about it. Sunlight flashed from the pasture, the barn roof, the pickup windshields, and the expensive black SUV at the gate, as if the whole valley had been covered in broken mirrors. Cole walked down the drive with Ranger at his left knee, neither hurrying nor slowing. Grant Voss waited beside the SUV with a man whose suit looked too thin for Colorado and whose smile looked too practiced for truth. Harold watched from the kitchen window. Martha stood beside him, drying the same plate far longer than necessary. Evelyn, who had been chopping vegetables with the aggression of a former sinner seeking redemption through soup, pressed her face near the glass until Harold told her she was fogging up the view. "Mr. Whitaker," Grant called, his voice polished enough to skate on. "This is Daniel Price, counsel for Silver Ridge." The lawyer gave a small nod. Cole returned it. Ranger sat without command and stared at Grant's shoes. "You could have called," Cole said. "We were in the neighborhood. Private property has a gate for that." Grant's smile tightened. "And yet here we all are having a neighborly conversation." Daniel Price stepped forward with a folder. "My client is concerned about defamatory statements being circulated regarding a settled matter from nearly a decade ago. Silver Ridge has always acted lawfully and generously toward this community." Cole took the folder but did not open it. "Generosity is easier to advertise than audit." Grant's eyes cooled. "Careful." Ranger's ears lifted. Daniel cleared his throat. "We are prepared to pursue remedies if harassment continues. By harassment, do you mean public records requests, lab testing, witness interviews, or a temporary stay on an eviction notice filed during a storm?" Daniel's smile thinned in appreciation of an opponent who had read the room. "I mean actions that create false impressions. Then correct them publicly. Release the fire investigation documents, vendor fuel records, insurance correspondence, and internal accounting from that quarter." Grant laughed once. "You don't get to walk into this valley after 24 years and demand family business records." "I didn't demand. I invited transparency. You invited trouble." Cole looked at him for a long second. In another life, the old Cole might have enjoyed that line too much. The present Cole only felt tired. Trouble was already here. It just got comfortable. The lawyer warned, implied, and phrased for 10 more minutes. Cole answered only what needed answering. Ranger remained still except once when Grant shifted his weight toward the ranch house and the dog rose smoothly to all fours. It was a small movement. It ended the visit faster than any threat. When the SUV finally backed down the drive, Cole photographed the tire tracks out of habit, then returned to the kitchen. Everyone pretended not to have been watching. Everyone had been watching. Harold sat at the table with both hands around a mug. "They offer money yet? Not this time. They will." Martha set the plate down. "Let them. We are old, not for sale." Evelyn whispered amen with the solemnity of a courtroom oath. Cole placed the folder on the counter. It contained a formal cease and desist letter, a few selectively copied old reports, and a warning that interference with lien acquisition could expose the Veterans Center to civil claims. Harold stared at the papers. "This is how they do it. Paper first, shame second. Then people stop calling." Cole slid the folder into an evidence binder. "This time, paper answers paper." Harold gave him a look. "You always sound that calm." "No." "Good. I'd distrust you otherwise." The next pressure came not from Grant, but from the weather. That night, the temperature dropped fast, the sky clear and merciless stars glittering over the peaks like nail heads in black wood. Cole had convinced Harold and Martha to stay in the ranch house guest rooms for a few nights, under the excuse of early kitchen planning. But Harold insisted on returning to the cabin after dinner to retrieve Martha's medicine, Abigail's Bible, and a box of tax records. Cole offered to drive. Harold refused. Martha overruled both men by putting on her coat and saying Ranger could decide. Ranger walked to Cole's truck. "Traitor," Harold muttered. The drive up to the cabin was quiet, except for the heater and the occasional clink of empty canning jars in a box Martha had brought along. When they arrived, the cabin stood dark against the snow, its plastic window rattling in a wind that had teeth. Cole noticed at once that the porch light, usually weak but present, was out. Harold frowned. "Breaker again." Ranger stepped from the truck and stopped. His nose lifted. He did not growl. He simply became still. Cole raised a hand. "Stay by the truck." Harold bristled. "It's my house, and my dog says wait." Martha touched Harold's sleeve. That worked where command would not. Cole moved to the side of the cabin, flashlight angled low. He found the service box open, the latch hanging loose. No dramatic sabotage, no sparking wires, just deliberate tampering. Crude, but enough to cut power and risk the pipes freezing. He photographed it, then called the sheriff's non-emergency line and Marisol. He did not describe danger in colorful terms. He stated facts. Power disconnected, elderly residents, active legal dispute, severe cold. Harold stood in the yard, shaking, though not from cold alone. "They want us scared." "Yes, I am." The admission seemed to cost him more than any shout would have. Martha took his hand. "So am I. We can be scared in a warm house tonight." Ranger pressed against Harold's leg, and Harold put one hand on the dog's neck, fingers disappearing into thick sable fur. Cole looked at the cabin, at the red notice still nailed to the door, though it no longer had legal force for the moment, at the black trees beyond. Civilized cruelty had taken off its gloves just enough to show the knuckles. He kept his voice level. "You are both coming back to the ranch. We document this. We don't answer fear with foolishness." Harold's jaw moved, then he nodded. The sheriff's deputy who arrived was young, polite, and visibly uncomfortable. His name was Aaron Bell, and he kept glancing toward the Silver Ridge access road as if the mountain itself might report him. Cole gave him photographs, times, and the legal context. Harold gave a short statement. Martha added details with a precision that made Deputy Bell stand straighter. "I can't say who did it," she said. "But I can say when we left, the latch was closed because I closed it myself after Harold forgot, and I told him if the pipes froze, I would make him sleep beside them and apologize." Deputy Bell wrote that down, then looked embarrassed. Martha smiled sweetly. "You may leave out the apology." The deputy almost smiled back. It mattered. Fear lost a little ground whenever ordinary decency returned to a face. Before leaving, Deputy Bell lowered his voice to Cole. "Off record, sir. Be careful. People around here don't like poking Silver Ridge." Cole looked at the young man. "Do you—" Bell swallowed. "I like keeping my job." "Understandable. Do it honestly." The deputy nodded once, perhaps grateful, perhaps ashamed. Back at the ranch, Martha made tea because some women respond to intimidation by boiling water with moral purpose. Harold sat near the kitchen window and stared into the dark. Cole expected anger. Instead, the old man looked smaller, and that frightened Cole more. Ranger laid his head on Harold's lap. Harold did not pretend not to need it. Evelyn arrived in flannel pajamas under a parka, hair flattened on one side, carrying a casserole nobody had requested. "I heard," she said. "Of course you did," Harold replied. "News travels faster when wearing slippers." Evelyn set the casserole down and, to everyone's surprise, began to cry. "I helped make this town quiet," she said. "I know tonight wasn't my doing, but years of quiet taught men like Grant where to step." Martha went to her and held her. Harold looked away, not out of cruelty, but because forgiveness arriving early can embarrass old wounds. Cole watched them and understood that the case was no longer only about proving who lit a fire years ago. It was about teaching a town to hear itself again. The following day, the ranch kitchen became headquarters. Marisol filed an emergency motion regarding interference with the Reeds' utilities. Dana accelerated her financial review. Evelyn created a list of former Silver Ridge employees and called it her Repentance Directory. Harold objected to the name. Evelyn told him to start his own directory if he wanted branding authority. Ranger stole one biscuit and was tried in the court of public opinion where Martha declared him guilty but beloved. These small moments kept the story human. Cole needed them. Without laughter, justice could become another cold machine. Luis Ortega returned Dana's call and agreed to speak by video. His face appeared on Cole's laptop that afternoon, older than the file photo, kind-eyed, cautious. He remembered Harold. "He pulled me toward the door," Luis said. "I was confused, alarms going, lights bad. I remember his voice telling me to keep low. I don't remember everything, but I know he was helping me." Harold sat off camera, tears shining but not falling. Cole asked whether Luis had heard anything before the fire. Luis hesitated. Grant arguing with someone. Money. Inventory. He said his father couldn't find out. I didn't know what it meant. "Would you sign a statement?" Cole asked. Luis looked down. "I owe Mr. Reed that much. More than that." Harold covered his eyes with one hand. Martha put her hand on his shoulder. No one spoke for a while. Grant's offer arrived 2 days later through Daniel Price. Not direct. Never direct. A confidential settlement proposal framed as compassionate resolution, offering enough money to pay the cabin debts, cover medical expenses, and fund a comfortable retirement for Harold and Martha if they agreed to cease public claims related to the Silver Ridge incident and decline participation in any further civil or criminal complaint. Cole read it once. Marisol read it twice, then said, "Legally polished, morally damp." Harold asked to see it. Martha sat beside him. Evelyn stood behind them, wringing a dish towel. Cole said what he had promised himself he would say. "This is your decision, not mine. If you take it, I will respect that. If you refuse it, I will support that. No speeches." Harold read the amount. His face did not change, but his hands tightened. Martha looked at the number and closed her eyes. They were old. They were tired. Money like that was not abstract. It meant heat. Medicine repairs quiet mornings without calculating every can of beans. Cole knew it would be arrogant to pretend the decision was simple. Poverty turns dignity into daily labor. Sometimes people who have never missed a bill talk too cheaply about principle. Harold asked everyone to leave the kitchen except Martha. Cole, Evelyn, Marisol, and Ranger stepped into the dining room. Ranger objected to being separated from Harold by lying directly across the threshold, which Cole allowed because the dog had better instincts than most committees. The old couple spoke softly for nearly an hour. Sometimes Martha's voice rose. Sometimes Harold coughed. Sometimes there was silence. Cole stood by the window watching snow sift from the barn roof and remembered Abigail's letter, "Silence being chosen for us." He would not choose for the Reeds now. When Harold finally called them back, he had the settlement papers folded in front of him. Martha's eyes were red but clear. Harold looked at Cole first, then Evelyn, then Marisol. "That money would buy comfort," he said. "And Lord knows comfort has looked mighty handsome from a distance." Martha took his hand. "But it would not buy Abigail's name back. It would not make the boy Louis remember publicly. It would not tell the town that my wife walked beside an innocent man all these years." He pushed the papers toward Marisol. "No." Evelyn let out a sound between a sob and a laugh. Cole felt pride rise in him so sharply it almost hurt. Harold pointed a finger at him. "Don't you look heroic at me. This is going to be miserable." Cole nodded. Yes, sir. Good, then we understand each other. By evening, the refusal had somehow reached town, though only 6 people knew. Evelyn blamed the walls, Marisol blamed predictable leaks, Cole blamed Grant's side. Because the next move came too fast. A public statement from Silver Ridge expressing disappointment that outside influences were exploiting an elderly couple's hardship for personal and commercial gain. The statement did not name Cole. It did not need to. Comments spread online. Some praised the Voss family. Some defended the Reeds. Some demanded proof from people who had ignored the absence of proof 9 years earlier. Cole read none of them after the first minute. Do not feed digital coyotes, Evelyn advised. Harold, who had never used social media and considered email a trial sent by clerks, asked if the coyotes paid property tax. Martha told him to drink his tea. That night, Cole walked the pasture with Ranger under a moon bright enough to turn snow into pewter. The dog ranged ahead, then stopped near the fence line, nose high. A vehicle idled on the county road beyond the trees. Cole did not approach. He photographed the lights, logged the time, and returned to the house. No theatrics, no chase. The pressure was building, but so was the record. In the kitchen window he saw Harold and Martha sitting side by side, under warm light, their silhouettes close. The rejected settlement on the table between them like a defeated temptation. Cole thought of the pans clanging in the storm, of Abigail's flour-covered biscuit hitting Grant's vest of Ranger's nose, finding what men had buried. Winter still owned the mountains, but under all that white, water had begun moving. February settled over the valley with a strange mixture of beauty and strain. The mountains shone every morning like they had been washed clean for a painting, while down in town people lowered their voices when Cole entered the market, then raised them again as soon as the bell stopped ringing behind him. Snowbanks along Main Street grew gray at the edges from exhaust and plow grit. Posters for Silver Ridge charity events hung in cafe windows beside flyers asking for volunteers at the new Veterans Center kitchen. Telluride had become 2 stories sharing the same sidewalks. In one, the Voss family remained generous builders of the valley. In the other, Harold and Martha Reed were no longer a sad old couple at the edge of town, but living evidence that respectability could bury a person without leaving fingerprints. Cole moved through it carefully. He did not give interviews. He did not post statements. He kept his head down, his records clean, and Ranger close. That frustrated Grant more than any speech would have. Men who live by public image prefer opponents who can be made to look angry. Cole gave him paperwork patience and a dog who stared at polished shoes like they might confess. The ranch kitchen began changing faster than the town did. Contractors replaced cracked tile, installed safer wiring, widened the pantry door, and rebuilt the old vent hood. Harold supervised with a clipboard Marisol had given him as a joke, and he had accepted with alarming seriousness. Martha tested recipes for future residents, writing notes in a spiral notebook. More salt after hard work. Less pepper for the anxious stomachs. Soup must be hot but not rushed. Coffee strong enough for men who pretend they do not need comfort. Evelyn came every afternoon, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with names from her repentance directory, sometimes with nothing but nervous energy and a need to be useful. Ranger appointed himself inspector of every delivery. He rejected 1 box of mugs by sniffing it and walking away. Harold agreed with him. Too small, he said. A mug should feel like a promise. Cole ordered larger mugs. It was easier than arguing with 2 old veterans of hunger, 1 human and 1 canine. The legal case moved in layers. Dana's financial work uncovered more missing money in Silver Ridge's accounts hidden through vendor adjustments and delayed deposits in the months before the warehouse fire. Marisol petitioned for access to additional records tying the request not to revenge but to Harold's civil restoration and the Reeds' financial damages. Luis Ortega signed his affidavit. Two former employees agreed to speak privately, though both asked not to be named until subpoenas forced courage upon them. The lab finalized its report on the skillet, and the scorched apron scrap both carried traces consistent with the same industrial fuel blend purchased by Silver Ridge for snow maintenance equipment that season. It did not say Grant Voss had poured anything anywhere. It did not need to. Truth coal had learned often arrived like a winter fence emerging from snow, one post, then another, then enough to see the line. Harold read the report at the kitchen table, lips moving silently over technical words. Martha sat beside him with one hand on his arm. "So I wasn't crazy," Harold said at last. Nobody answered too fast. That sentence deserved space. "No," Cole said. "You weren't." Harold looked at the window. 9 years is a long time to wonder if smoke scrambled your own mind. Ranger placed his chin on Harold's knee. Harold scratched behind the scarred ear. "Good dog," he whispered. "Good witness." The first apology came from a man named Ben Haskell who owned the hardware store. He arrived at the ranch carrying a box of heavy-duty shelf brackets and wearing the expression of someone delivering either supplies or his own sentence. Harold met him on the porch. Cole stayed inside, close enough if needed, far enough to let it belong to Harold. Ben removed his cap. "I should have said something years back," he began. Harold did not help him. "I knew you weren't the kind to do what they said, but Silver Ridge bought from me. Big account. I had 2 kids in college." Harold's face stayed unreadable. Ben swallowed. "That's not an excuse. It's just the cowardice I had handy." Martha, who had stepped into the hall, closed her eyes at the word cowardice, perhaps because naming a thing honestly made it less poisonous. Harold looked at the box. "Brackets? For your pantry shelves, not charity. I owed the kitchen a discount from back when Abigail helped my youngest pass algebra." Harold's mouth moved at Abigail's name. "She charged him cookies. He still says they were worth more than tutoring." Silence held. Then Harold took the box. "Set them by the pantry." Ben looked as if he might collapse from relief. Forgiveness did not arrive. Permission to start did. After Ben, others came in smaller ways. A retired nurse offered to help Martha organize medications for future residents and quietly checked Harold's blood pressure while pretending to discuss soup. A former Silver Ridge shuttle driver left a note saying he remembered Grant's truck near the warehouse that night, though he had not told anyone because his wife worked at the resort spa. A church group delivered quilts for the Veterans Center, and Martha accepted after making them sign a volunteer sheet because warmth counts as inventory. The town did not transform overnight. Some people doubled down on old loyalties. Some accused Cole of buying sympathy. Some said Harold should let the past rest. Martha answered that at Parker's Market one afternoon while choosing flour. "The past has been resting on our chest for 9 years, she said, not loudly, but loudly enough. We are simply asking it to get up." Evelyn dropped a jar of jam in admiration. Ranger beside Cole sniffed the broken glass and looked offended by waste. Grant's response shifted from polished warning to public pressure. Silver Ridge announced a winter fundraiser for elderly residents affected by housing insecurity, complete with photos of smiling staff holding blankets. Cole saw the announcement and almost laughed at the nerve of it. Evelyn did laugh, but not kindly. "That man would sell umbrellas in a flood he caused," Marisol advised restraint. Dana advised subpoenas. Harold advised more coffee. The fundraiser mattered because Lydia Voss would be there. Until then, she had remained a name at the edge of the story, Warren's quieter child, Grant's sister, the charity director with sad eyes. Evelyn insisted Lydia had a conscience. Cole trusted Evelyn's guilt-tuned instincts enough to attend the fundraiser, not as a guest, but as a donor to the public charity event, wearing a plain jacket and bringing Ranger under service credentials. Harold refused to come. Martha said she would rather scrub the ranch oven with a toothbrush, Evelyn came because curiosity and penance both wore her coat. Silver Ridge's ballroom glittered with chandeliers shaped like icicles and windows framing the moonlit slopes. Wealth has a particular smell. In winter perfume, wool, polished wood, expensive wine, and the faint absence of anyone worrying about heat. Cole hated how quickly he noticed exits, security cameras, private hallways, staff routes. Ranger walked at his side, calm but alert. Grant saw him within 5 minutes and crossed the room with Daniel Price close behind. "Mr. Whitaker," Grant said, "how generous of you to support our vulnerable seniors." Evelyn muttered, "Lord, hold my tongue or improve my aim." Cole gave her a look. She smiled into her cider. Grant continued, "I hope Harold and Martha are comfortable. I hear you've relocated them." "They are employed." "Of course. Employment can be such a flexible word." Cole did not answer. Across the room, a woman in a dark green dress paused mid-conversation and looked at them. Lydia Voss. She had Grant's bone structure without his shine, Warren's posture without his cruelty. Her eyes moved from Cole to Ranger, then to Evelyn. Recognition, discomfort, and something like pleading crossed her face before she turned away. Evelyn saw it too. "She knows." Maybe. No. That look was a woman carrying a locked box in her ribs. Cole waited until Grant was drawn away by donors, then moved toward a quieter hall where Lydia had disappeared. He did not corner her. He stood near a table of silent auction brochures and let Ranger sit in plain view. Lydia approached after nearly 10 minutes pretending to check flower arrangements. "Mr. Whitaker," she said. "Miss Voss," her hands trembled slightly against the vase. "You should stop." "Because I'm wrong? Because my brother will not." Cole kept his voice gentle. "What do you know?" Lydia looked toward the ballroom. "I know my family has done good things too. Scholarships, medical funds, jobs. Good things don't erase harm." "I know." The two words came out almost without breath. Ranger rose and walked one step closer, then sat. Lydia looked at the dog and tears filled her eyes so suddenly Cole nearly looked away. "The night of the fire," she whispered. "I saw a video clip. Not the official footage, a backup from an exterior maintenance camera. Grant told me it was nothing, that it would only confuse people and hurt Father. I was 26 and stupid enough to believe fear was loyalty." "Do you still have it?" Lydia's lips parted. Before she could answer, Grant's voice sounded from the hall. "Lydia?" She flinched like a door slamming. Cole turned. Grant stood at the hall entrance, smile gone. For one moment the family resemblance between him and Lydia sharpened into something bleak. "Guests are asking for you," Grant said to his sister. Lydia lowered her head. "Of course." She walked past Cole without looking at him, but as she did, her hand brushed the table. A folded place card slipped from beneath her fingers and fell near Ranger's paw. Cole did not pick it up until Grant had escorted her away. On the inside, written in small script, were 4 words. "Ask Evelyn about March." Cole handed it to Evelyn when they returned to the ballroom. Her face went white. "March?" he asked. Evelyn stared at the card. "The mail renovation. We replaced the old sorting cabinet in March after the fire. I told you some envelopes fell behind it. What I didn't tell you is that a resort courier came that week asking to take the old cabinet for disposal. I said no because Martha had already asked for scrap wood for church shelves. The cabinet went to the church basement." Cole felt the fence line of truth gain another post. "Is it still there?" Evelyn swallowed. "If the church ladies haven't turned it into a craft project, yes." They left the fundraiser before dessert. Grant watched them go from the ballroom doors, one hand in his pocket, his expression calm enough to worry Cole more than anger would have. At the church, the basement smelled of dust wax and old hymnals. Evelyn found the cabinet under a tarp behind boxes of Christmas pageant costumes. Cole photographed it before touching anything. Ranger sniffed along the bottom panel, then sat sharply. Cole removed the loose backboard with a screwdriver from Evelyn's glove box. Behind it, wrapped in brittle packing paper, were 3 envelopes and a small gray key labeled SR, Auxiliary Archive. The envelopes were addressed to Abigail Reed in Cole's handwriting. One had been opened and resealed. Evelyn began to cry without sound. Cole stared at the key. A resort archive key hidden in a postal cabinet after the fire. Lydia had not given them the video, not yet, but she had pointed them to a door. Above them in the sanctuary, the old building creaked under the cold. Ranger leaned against Cole's leg. Evelyn whispered, "I am so sorry." Cole looked at the envelopes, at the handwriting of a younger man who believed distance could not defeat devotion. "Don't be sorry quietly anymore," he said. Evelyn nodded. In that basement, among pageant wings, hymnals, and forgotten furniture, the case changed shape. It was no longer only about a fire. It was about a system of small thefts, letters, wages, records, dignity, years. Cole placed the key in an evidence bag, and for the first time since he had seen Harold carrying pans through the snow, he felt the past turn its face toward court. March arrived without warmth, but with a different quality of light. Sharper at the edges, less willing to let the mountains keep all their secrets. Snow still lay deep in the shaded gullies, and the ranch yard remained a patchwork of ice boot tracks and rangers looping patrol routes. But meltwater had begun to tick from the barn roof in the afternoons. Cole had come to distrust beautiful days. They made people careless. He spent the morning in the ranch office with Marisol Dana on video, Evelyn in a chair by the heater, and the small gray key lying inside a clear evidence bag on the desk. Harold and Martha had insisted on being present, though Harold claimed he only came because the coffee at Cole's office was an insult that needed supervision. Ranger lay between Harold's boots like a sandbag with ears. The key was stamped SR, Auxiliary Archive, and according to Dana's quick research, Silver Ridge had used an auxiliary records room in an older maintenance building before digitizing most files. The building still existed near the lower service road, technically part of the resort, but leased to a document storage vendor for several years after the fire. That vendor had since gone bankrupt, leaving records in legal limbo, which Dana described as a buffet for patient attorneys. Marisol filed an emergency preservation demand before anyone touched a door. "We do this clean," she said. "If the key opens something, I want a court order opening it with us." The order took 4 days and a judge who disliked surprises from influential families. Daniel Price objected, arguing that the request was speculative, invasive, and motivated by personal grievance. Marisol responded that personal grievance did not make physical evidence imaginary, and that the Reeds had a right to records relevant to a public accusation that had damaged their livelihood for nearly a decade. Cole sat behind her in court, face neutral, while Grant watched from the other side with his practiced stillness. Harold wore his patched suit jacket. Martha held Abigail's Bible in both hands. Evelyn sat behind them, lips moving in a prayer or a list of people she intended to scold later. Ranger could not enter the courtroom, so he waited with a deputy in the hall and charmed 3 clerks into surrendering crackers. When the judge granted supervised access to the auxiliary archive, Grant's expression did not break. That worried Cole. Calm men who lose one door often know where another one is hidden. They opened the archive 2 mornings later under court supervision. No drama, no kicked doors, no flashlights sweeping through danger, just legal entry cameras, dust masks, and a clerk documenting each box number while a resort representative complained about temperature control. The maintenance building sat below Silver Ridge's main lodge, half buried in plowed snow, its windows filmed with grime. Ranger was allowed inside as a certified working dog, assisting in scent association from already documented evidence, a phrase Marisol enjoyed saying because Daniel Price hated hearing it. The key opened a side cabinet in the archive room, not the main door. Inside were old routing logs, maintenance fuel sheets, backup camera inventory lists, and a plastic case with several unlabeled data drives. Dana, who had flown in overnight because curiosity had defeated distance, photographed everything with calm delight. "This," she said, "is what happens when arrogant people trust clutter." Harold stood in the doorway, not touching anything. His eyes moved across the boxes as if they might contain the years he had lost. Martha slipped her hand into his. Ranger sniffed along the cabinet base, then sat beside a lower drawer. In the drawer, under a stack of outdated safety manuals, Dana found a printed fuel requisition signed electronically by Grant Voss 2 days before the fire. The quantity was larger than routine snow maintenance required. Not proof alone. Another post in the fence. The drives required forensic imaging. Cole did not allow anyone to play them casually on a laptop. Dana made copies under supervision, sealed the originals, and took the images to a secure workstation at the ranch. That night, the kitchen table became a waiting room. Martha cooked because waiting without food offended her theology. Harold pretended to read. Evelyn organized napkins by size until Cole gently took them away. Ranger slept with his head facing the office door where Dana worked. At 11:18 p.m., Dana stepped into the kitchen holding a printed still frame. Her face had lost its humor. "We have video." Harold's hand tightened around his mug. Dana placed the image on the table. It showed the exterior of the Silver Ridge warehouse loading bay, grainy but clear enough. A figure in a dark parka stood near a service cart. Another figure, older, carrying a soup container, approached from the side. Timestamped the night of the fire. "I won't play the whole thing here without counsel present," Dana said. But the clip shows Harold arriving after activity had already started near the fuel storage. It also shows him entering after alarms begin, then helping someone toward the exit. Martha covered her mouth. Harold stared at the image as if he had been handed back his own face. The next day, Marisol filed to reopen the civil record and referred the material to state investigators. Cole made sure Harold heard every step before it happened. No surprises, no grand reveals for emotional effect. Harold had lived too long inside stories told over his head. This time the truth would not use him as scenery. News still leaked. By evening, local media reported that new evidence had emerged in the Silver Ridge fire. Silver Ridge issued a statement praising due process while condemning reckless speculation. Grant appeared on a regional business podcast and spoke sorrowfully about the pain of seeing his elderly father dragged through old accusations. He did not mention Harold by name. He did not need to. The comments came again, some kinder, some uglier. Cole avoided them. Evelyn did not, then regretted it, then read 3 aloud anyway because she said anger needed witnesses. Martha finally took the phone from her. "We will not let strangers season our soup," she said. Evelyn blinked. "That is either wisdom or a cookbook title." Harold said, "Both." Pressure intensified in ways that remained carefully non-graphic, bureaucratic, and exhausting. A contractor scheduled for the ranch kitchen suddenly withdrew, citing calendar conflicts. A supplier delayed the commercial stove. The bank handling one of the center's operating accounts requested additional compliance documents at an oddly inconvenient time. Cole had seen coordinated friction before. It looked like coincidence until mapped. He mapped it. Dana mapped it better. Within 48 hours, she connected 2 delays to businesses with Silver Ridge contracts. Cole did not accuse publicly. He found alternate vendors, documented the pattern, and sent polite letters that made future deniability more expensive. Harold watched this with wary approval. "You fight like a bookkeeper with a bayonet." "Thank you." Wasn't praise. Taking it anyway. Ranger barked once, which Martha interpreted as agreement. Lydia Voss did not contact them for a week. Cole did not push. Evelyn wanted to march into Silver Ridge with a casserole and a moral ultimatum. Marisol forbade casseroles as legal strategy. Then, on a gray Thursday, a packet arrived at Parker's Market, addressed to Evelyn in handwriting so neat it looked afraid of itself. Inside was a copy of a private memo from Silver Ridge's finance office dated 2 weeks before the fire, flagging unexplained transfers authorized under Grant's credentials. There was also a note, "I cannot undo, silence all at once. I am trying to make it smaller." Evelyn brought it to the ranch with trembling hands. Harold read the note, then looked out the window for a long time. "That girl was always quiet." Martha nodded. "Quiet people hear things loud folks miss." Cole asked Evelyn if she could safely communicate back. Evelyn said she would try through the church office where Lydia sometimes arranged donations. Marisol insisted every exchange be documented, and no one pressure Lydia beyond her own willingness. "A frightened witness is still a person," she said. Cole appreciated that more than he said. The turning point for Harold came not from evidence, but from a child's drawing. A local elementary teacher brought a packet of cards from students after the church prayed for the Veterans Center. Most showed flags, mountains, dogs that looked nothing like Ranger, and soup bowls large enough to bathe in. One card showed an old man stirring a pot under the words, "Mr. Reed makes brave soup." Harold read it twice. His eyes filled. "I haven't made anything brave in years." Martha took the card and pinned it to the temporary bulletin board. "Then start with Thursday." Cole watched Harold stand straighter after that, not because pain vanished, but because usefulness returned. Shame hates usefulness. It cannot survive long in a room where people need your soup. Grant's second offer came privately through Daniel Price, larger than the first and wrapped in softer language. It included a public statement expressing regret for misunderstandings, a charitable donation to the Veterans Center, lifetime housing support for Harold and Martha, and a confidentiality clause thick enough to bury a mountain. Harold read it in Marisol's office. Martha read it too. Cole said nothing. Evelyn, who had been allowed to attend only after promising not to call anyone a snake until after business hours, sat on her hands. Harold asked Marisol, "If we take this, does the court record say I didn't do it?" "No, it says the parties resolved their dispute without admission." "Does Grant answer for lying?" "No." "Does the town learn what happened?" "Only what the statement says." Harold folded the offer once, carefully along its own crease. "Then it's a warm blanket over a dirty floor." Martha placed her hand over his. "We have slept under worse." "Not by choice," he said. He slid the offer back. "No." This time his voice did not tremble. The refusal changed something in the room. Cole had respected Harold from the beginning, loved him in the complicated way a rescued boy loves the man who refused to pity him. But now he saw the old cook fully, not as someone needing defense, not as a victim of Voss cruelty, but as a man choosing the shape of his remaining years. Harold did not have many illusions left. He knew court would be tiring. He knew some neighbors would never apologize. He knew money could have made his final winters easier. He chose a clean name anyway. Martha squeezed his hand. "Abigail would say you are being stubborn." Harold's mouth twitched. She came by it honest. Evelyn lost her battle with tears. Marisol passed tissues without comment. Ranger put both front paws on Harold's knees, an unusual breach of manners, and Harold laughed through the wet in his eyes. All right, I hear you." That night, Cole walked alone to the pasture fence while the ranch house glowed behind him. He carried Abigail's opened letter in his coat pocket, not as a shrine, as Harold had warned, but as a compass he did not yet know how to read. The mountain stood black against a sky salted with stars. From the kitchen came laughter, Evelyn accusing Harold of underestimating paprika, Martha defending tradition, Ranger probably committing biscuit theft under cover of community. Cole felt the old guilt rise, but it no longer had the same shape. It was becoming responsibility, and responsibility, unlike guilt, knew how to put on boots. His phone buzzed. A message from Dana, state investigator assigned. Hearing likely in April. Also, you need sleep. He typed back, Ranger told you. Dana replied, everyone tells me. Cole smiled, then looked toward the distant lights of Silver Ridge. Grant would not stop. Warren would not fold easily. Lydia had only begun to move. But Harold had refused silence twice, and the town had started to hear the difference between peace and quiet. Snow slid from a pine bough beyond the fence landing with a soft collapse. Under it, dark earth showed for the first time in months. April did not melt the mountains so much as loosen their grip. Snow retreated from south-facing slopes in ragged patches, revealing flattened grass, mud, and stones that had been waiting all winter with the patience of old witnesses. The Veterans Center Ranch became busier each day. Plumbers arrived, electricians argued gently with walls, volunteers sanded tables in the barn, and Harold ruled the kitchen renovation from a stool Martha claimed was his throne of complaint. He had signed his name to the work now, and the work had answered by giving him reasons to wake before pain finished counting him. Still, the public pressure wore on everyone. Silver Ridge's statement had inspired letters to the editor, anonymous comments, and 2 local radio segments about whether outside money should reopen settled wounds. Cole listened to one while driving to town, then turned it off when a caller described Harold as confused. Ranger in the passenger seat placed one paw on Cole's forearm before Cole realized he was gripping the wheel too hard. I know, Cole said. No feeding coyotes. Ranger kept the paw there another mile, enforcing policy. The town hall meeting was supposed to be about the Veterans Center permit. It became inevitably about everything else. The room smelled of wet coats, coffee, and civic discomfort. Folding chairs filled early. Silver Ridge employees sat in clusters. Church ladies occupied the second row with the calm intimidation of people who had organized casseroles through worse crises. Harold and Martha sat near the aisle. Evelyn sat behind them, back straight face, pale but determined. Cole stood at the front beside Marisol, answering questions about traffic noise, septic capacity, and whether recovering veterans might disturb nearby properties. He kept his voice plain. He described counseling partnerships, quiet hours, local hiring, and emergency protocols. Then a man in a Silver Ridge vest rose and asked whether the center was simply a tool to launder Cole's personal vendetta against a respected employer. The room shifted. Harold's hands tightened on his cane. Martha closed her Bible. Cole felt heat rise in his chest, the old thunder Abigail had named before life taught him restraint. Ranger, allowed as a service animal, stood from beside Cole and leaned against his leg. Not dramatically. Enough. Cole looked down, breathed once, and looked back at the man. No, he said. The center is for veterans. The legal case is for the Reeds. Powerful people may find it convenient to confuse the two. I won't help them. The answer did not end the tension, but it changed its posture. Marisol followed with documents, permits, and a tone so dry it could have preserved fruit. Evelyn was next, though nobody had invited her to speak. She rose from the second row, hands shaking around a folded paper. Cole saw Harold turn slightly, surprised. Evelyn walked to the microphone and adjusted it down. My name is Evelyn Parker, she began. Most of you know me because I sell stamps, coffee, gossip, and occasionally expired cough drops by accident. A few people laughed. She did not. 9 years ago, when Harold Reed was accused after the Silver Ridge fire, I did not believe he was guilty. I knew his character. I knew Martha's. I knew Abigail's. I also knew the Voss family could make life hard for people who crossed them. So I stayed quiet in the ways that mattered. The room went still. I handled mail during those years. I saw irregularities with letters between Abigail Reed and Cole Whitaker. I did not understand all of it then, and later I told myself it was too late. That was cowardice. I am saying this publicly because private regret is too comfortable. Her voice broke. She kept going. Harold, Martha, I am sorry. Abigail deserved better from me. So did you. Harold did not move at first. Martha reached for his hand. The town watched hungry in that way crowds become when forgiveness might appear. Harold rose slowly. Cole almost stepped forward, then stopped himself. Harold walked to the microphone with his cane ranger tracking him with worried eyes. He stood beside Evelyn. I don't know what to do with apologies yet, he said. His voice was rough, but it carried. Had a shortage so long I don't trust the supply. A soft ripple moved through the room. But I heard you. Evelyn nodded, tears on her cheeks. Harold looked out at the faces. I heard a lot of silence 9 years ago. Tonight I heard one person put her name on hers. That's a start. He returned to his seat. It was not a grand reconciliation. It was better. It was honest enough to stand on. After the meeting, the permit advanced with conditions. Grant did not attend, but Daniel Price stood in the back and left during Evelyn's statement. By midnight, clips from the meeting circulated online. Some people praised Evelyn. Some mocked her. Some asked whether more evidence existed. The next morning, Lydia Voss called Parker's Market before opening hours. Evelyn put the call on speaker with Cole and Marisol present after getting Lydia's permission. Lydia's voice sounded thin from lack of sleep. I saw the meeting, she said. I can't keep doing this. Marisol spoke gently. Doing what, Ms. Voss? Letting my brother decide what truth costs. She agreed to meet at the church with counsel present. She would bring what she had, the original backup video, internal finance memos, and notes from a conversation she overheard between Grant and Warren after the fire. I don't want to destroy my father, Lydia said. I know he has done harm, but he is still my father. Cole answered before Marisol could. Telling the truth is not destruction. Sometimes it is the only way anything clean survives. Lydia was silent. Abigail said something like that once, she whispered. She told me truth was not a weapon unless you aimed it at the innocent. Then she hung up. The meeting with Lydia happened under gray skies and a church roof that leaked in one corner, despite Warren Voss having paid to repair it 3 years earlier. Evelyn noticed the leak and said nothing, a miracle of restraint. Lydia arrived without makeup, wearing jeans boots and a wool coat too plain for a Voss event. She looked younger than 39 and older than fear. Her attorney, a woman from Durango, came with her. Marisol laid out ground rules. No pressure, no promises beyond legal process. Lydia placed a small hard drive, a folder, and a handwritten statement on the table. Her hands shook so badly that Martha, who had insisted on coming, reached across and covered them. Lydia broke at that. Not loudly. She bowed her head and cried with the exhaustion of someone whose conscience had been holding a door shut for years. Martha did not tell her it was all right. It was not all right. She simply held on until Lydia could breathe. Lydia's account filled gaps without needing melodrama. Grant had been hiding financial losses tied to private ventures. Warren suspected missing funds but wanted it handled internally to protect the resort's image. The warehouse fire destroyed records that would have exposed the transfers. Harold was convenient because he had access debts and no power. After the fire, Lydia saw a backup clip showing Grant near the fuel storage before alarms and Harold entering later with food. She confronted Grant. He told her she did not understand business, family, or consequences. Warren told her the clip would only confuse investigators and harm innocent employees. Later, Lydia noticed mail irregularities involving Abigail and Cole because Grant had bragged after drinking that the sailor boy stopped being a problem once the letters stopped. Lydia had carried that sentence for years like a coal she could neither drop nor cool. "I was afraid," she said. "Then Abigail died, and fear became shame. Then Harold and Martha kept getting poorer, and shame became something I had to live around every day." Harold looked at her for a long time. "You were young." Lydia shook her head. "Old enough to know a wrong thing." "Yes," Harold said. "You were." The evidence moved quickly after that. State investigators took formal statements. Dana's financial maps were turned over. Luis confirmed his affidavit on recorded video. Lydia's hard drive contained the backup clip, not sharp enough for a movie, but clear enough for truth. It showed timing, movement, and Harold's act of help rather than guilt. It did not show harm in detail, and no one replayed it for shock. In the story Cole was building for court, the focus stayed where it belonged, on choices, cover-up consequences, and the long recovery of people harmed by a lie. YouTube drama would have loved the flames. Cole hated them. The fire had already taken enough attention from the people who survived it. Grant reacted by giving an interview in front of Silver Ridge's stone fireplace. He spoke of betrayal, manipulated elderly witnesses, and a sister under emotional strain. He did not name Lydia, but made sure everyone understood. Warren appeared beside him, looking frail, one hand resting over his chest, his voice soft as he asked the community to pray for unity. Martha watched the clip once, then turned it off. "Prayer without truth is just pretty noise," she said. Harold nodded. "Put that on a mug." Evelyn wrote it down instantly. Cole did not laugh. He was too busy watching Lydia's face in a still image from the interview. Standing behind Warren, half hidden, eyes lowered, the cost to her had begun. That cost arrived at the ranch 2 days later, when Lydia came to speak with Harold and Martha privately. Cole offered to leave. Harold told him to stay in the next room because young people with lawyers make old people tired. Ranger chose Lydia immediately, sitting beside her chair without being invited. She stroked his head with trembling fingers. "My father cut me off from the foundation," she said. "Grant says I am unstable. Some cousins won't answer calls." Martha poured tea. "Families can become weather. You still decide what coat to wear." Lydia gave a wet laugh. "Abigail used to say you spoke in kitchen proverbs." "She stole most of them and improved the grammar." Harold looked at Lydia. "Why come here?" "Because I need you to know I am testifying. Fully. Even if they try to make me look foolish." Harold's jaw worked. "Telling the truth won't make you ours if that's what you're asking. It won't fix Abigail." Lydia lowered her head. "I know." He continued softer. "But it may make you yours again." Lydia cried then. Martha held her. Ranger leaned harder against her knees. Cole looked away, giving the room what privacy he could. The final hearing was set for late April, though Marisol warned it might be only the beginning. Civil restoration, criminal referrals, insurance fraud, defamation, property liens, the case had grown branches. Harold seemed both steadier and more tired. Martha slept less. Cole caught himself hovering and forced himself to stop unless asked. Respect sometimes meant letting old people carry a glass of water without turning it into a rescue mission. The night before the preliminary hearing, Harold found Cole in the barn checking the locks. "You think we win tomorrow?" "I think we tell enough truth that losing gets harder." Harold considered that. "You ever get tired of careful answers?" "Constantly. Good." He leaned on his cane, looking at the half-finished dining hall where long tables waited under drop-cloths. "I hated you for a while." Cole took that without flinching. "I know. Not because you left. Boys leave. Because Abigail watched the road too long, and I let myself make you the shape of what hurt her." Cole's throat tightened. Harold continued. "Now I find out other hands were in it. Doesn't clean everything, You still stayed gone. Yes, but you came back in boots, not wishes. Harold held out Abigail's Bible. Cole stared at it. Martha wants you to carry it tomorrow. I told her that was sentimental foolishness. She told me I had survived 76 years and still knew nothing. Cole took the Bible carefully. She's usually right. Harold sighed. Painfully often. Cole slept badly, but not alone. Ranger climbed onto the bed at 3 in the morning, which he was not allowed to do, and did with the confidence of a decorated professional, ignoring poor policy. Cole woke with the dog's back pressed against his knees and did not make him move. At dawn, the valley lay under low clouds, the mountains hidden, the world waiting. The ranch kitchen smelled of coffee and biscuits. Harold wore his patched suit. Martha wore the dove brooch. Evelyn wore waterproof mascara and claimed it was for pollen. Lydia arrived with her attorney, pale but upright. Ranger wore his working harness. Cole placed Abigail's Bible in his coat pocket. They drove to the courthouse in 2 vehicles, slow, over wet roads edged with melting snow. Outside the building, reporters stood beneath umbrellas and townspeople gathered in uneasy clusters. Grant Voss arrived with Daniel Price and Warren in a wheelchair, cameras turning toward them. Cole helped Harold from the truck, but only after Harold gave him a look granting permission. Ranger stepped down last and stood beside them. For a moment, the old man, the old woman, the former SEAL, the canine, the repentant shopkeeper, and the frightened Voss sister stood together at the bottom of the courthouse steps. No one looked heroic. They looked tired, cold, and unwilling to lie. That would have to be enough. The courthouse in Montrose had been built with the confident plainness of a place that expected human conflict to line up and wait its turn. Gray stone brass handles polished floors, old benches worn smooth by anxious hands. Rain tapped against the windows when Cole entered with the reeds, not dramatic rain, just cold spring rain that made every coat smell faintly of wool and road grit. Harold walked slowly, but refused a wheelchair. Martha kept one hand near his elbow without touching, unless the step demanded it. Ranger moved on Cole's left, working harness, visible eyes scanning calmly. Evelyn carried a tote bag containing tissues, peppermints, 3 folders, and biscuits she insisted were for emergencies of the spirit. Lydia Voss walked behind Marisol with her attorney, her face pale but composed. Across the hall, Grant stood beside Daniel Price and Warren Voss, who looked smaller than his reputation and more fragile than Cole had expected. That did not soften Cole. Frailty could be real and still have been used as a shield for harm. Warren's eyes met Harold's for half a second, then slid away. Harold noticed. He can still look at the floor just fine, he murmured. Martha whispered, Behave. I am, quietly. The hearing began with procedural language which Evelyn later described as how lawyers make thunder wear slippers. Marisol's opening was measured. She did not accuse wildly. She built a timeline, Harold's contract work at Silver Ridge, the warehouse fire, the public accusation without conviction, the economic collapse that followed, the newly discovered mail irregularities, the fuel residue, the backup video, the financial records, and Lydia's statement. Daniel Price argued that old evidence was being reinterpreted through grief and outside influence. He referred to Cole's resources more than once, implying that money could manufacture truth. Cole listened without expression. Ranger leaned against his foot, once grounding him. When Harold's name was spoken as if he were a theory instead of a man, Cole felt Abigail's Bible in his coat pocket and kept still. Stillness was not weakness. Sometimes it was the last wall before anger became useful to the wrong side. Dana testified first as a forensic financial investigator. She explained in simple terms the pattern of missing funds, vendor discrepancies, and insurance settlement timing. She did not dramatize. She used charts. The judge asked questions. Daniel tried to suggest that discrepancies were common in complex resort operations. Dana agreed that mistakes happened, then calmly distinguished mistakes from repeated transfers routed through accounts tied to Grant's private ventures. Her politeness became a blade because it never looked like one. Evelyn squeezed Martha's hand every time Dana said inconsistent with routine accounting. Harold watched the charts like a man watching weather finally prove he had not imagined rain. Grant took notes. Warren kept his eyes closed. Lydia stared at the table in front of her. The lab expert came next, then the state investigator. The skillet and apron scrap were discussed carefully without theatrics. The expert explained that trace compounds on Harold's cookware and apron were consistent with Silver Ridge's industrial winter fuel blend and inconsistent with normal kitchen use. Daniel emphasized contamination possibilities, and the expert acknowledged limits. Marisol did not pretend the evidence stood alone. She placed it where it belonged, beside video timing vendor records, witness memories, and financial motive. Luis Ortega testified by video. His voice shook at first, but steadied when he described Harold helping him toward an exit after alarms began. The account stayed general, focused on confusion, smoke, and Harold's effort to help, rather than any graphic detail. "I was scared," Luis said. "Mr. Reed was scared too, I think, but he was trying to get me out. I never believed he started it." Harold bowed his head. Martha pressed a handkerchief into his palm. Cole looked at Ranger. The dog watched Harold, not the screen. Then came Evelyn. She walked to the witness chair like a woman approaching both court and confession. She described her work at the postal counter, the irregular handling of letters, Grant's visits, the old sorting cabinet, and the envelopes found hidden behind it. Daniel questioned her memory, her delay, her guilt, and her friendship with the Reeds. Evelyn took each blow without pretending it did not hurt. "Yes, I waited too long," she said. "Yes, I am ashamed. Shame is not proof that I am lying. It is why I finally stopped." In the benches behind her, a few townspeople shifted. Cole saw Ben Haskell wipe his eyes. He saw Deputy Bell standing near the back, off duty, listening hard. Public courage did not erase private failure, but it invited others to stop decorating theirs. Lydia testified after lunch. The courtroom seemed to inhale when her name was called. Grant looked at her once, a look that tried to command history back into place. Lydia did not look away this time. She spoke of the finance memo, the backup video, Grant's comments about the letters, Warren's insistence that family reputation mattered more than confusion, and her own silence. Daniel's cross-examination was careful, sharp, and unpleasant, without becoming openly cruel. He suggested she resented Grant, misunderstood business records, and had been influenced by Evelyn and Cole. Lydia folded her hands. "I was influenced by them," she said. Daniel looked briefly satisfied until she continued. "They influenced me to stop lying by omission." The courtroom stirred. The judge called for quiet. Lydia's voice trembled but did not break. "My brother did wrong. My father protected him. I protected them both by staying silent. Harold Reed paid for that. Martha Reed paid for that. Abigail Reed paid for that. I cannot give those years back. I can only stop adding to them." Warren opened his eyes then. For the first time all day, he looked not powerful, not sick, but old in the saddest sense, a man who had outlived the version of himself he wanted others to believe. The backup video was entered into evidence and reviewed in limited appropriate form. No one played it for spectacle. The court saw enough timing locations, Harold's arrival after suspicious activity, his movement toward helping Grant's presence where he had previously denied being. Daniel objected to interpretation. Marisol agreed that video did not speak every word, then placed beside it the fuel requisition, Dana's financial analysis, Lewis's memory, Lydia's statement, and the hidden letters. One thread could fray. Many threads made rope. Harold sat through it all with Martha's hand in his. Cole watched him age and unage by turns as each piece of evidence took a stone from his back, while reminding him how long he had carried it. Late in the afternoon, Daniel introduced the last argument they had expected. Harold had received cash from Silveridge 1 week before the fire, an amount large enough Daniel implied to suggest undisclosed conflict pressure or motive. He produced a copy of a payment record with Harold's signature. The room shifted. Harold frowned, confused. Martha leaned forward. Cole felt Marisol become very still beside him. This was the card from the outline of fear, a fact shaped to look like guilt. Daniel asked why Harold had not disclosed the payment. Harold stared at the paper. "Because I didn't know it was secret. What was it for?" Daniel asked. Harold's voice was low. "A bonus. For what?" Harold looked toward Warren. Warren's eyes closed again. "For feeding stranded guests during the blizzard that December. Kitchen staff couldn't get in. I cooked 2 nights at the lodge with Martha and Abigail helping. Mr. Voss thanked us in private and said not to make a fuss because payroll would be complicated." Daniel tilted his head. "Convenient memory." Martha stood halfway before Cole could move. "I have the thank you card," she said. The courtroom turned. Martha opened Abigail's Bible, removed a folded card pressed between pages, and handed it to Marisol. Cole had not known. Harold had not known either, judging by his face. The card was from Warren Voss, written in a firm hand 9 years earlier. "Harold, Martha, and Abigail Silveridge owes you gratitude for keeping our guests calm, fed, and cared for during the storm. Please accept this bonus with our thanks. Keep this between us until I sort out payroll. W.V." The silence after Marisol read it aloud was unlike any silence Cole had ever heard. It was not empty. It was full of doors closing on lies. Warren opened his eyes and looked at Martha, then at the card, then at his son. Grant's face had gone pale beneath its practiced color. Daniel requested a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. In the hallway, Evelyn began crying so hard that Ranger abandoned protocol and leaned against her knees. Harold sat on a bench, staring at Martha. "You kept it?" he asked. She closed the Bible. "Abigail tucked it there, said someday men who hide behind paper might meet better paper." Harold laughed once, wet and astonished. "That girl." Cole looked away, his own eyes burning. Abigail had entered the courtroom after all, not as a ghost, but as handwriting preserved by a mother who believed objects could outweigh lies. After the recess, the hearing's tone changed. Daniel still argued because that was his duty, but the ground under him had shifted. The judge ordered expanded review, referred matters for criminal investigation, paused all lien actions tied to the Reed cabin, pending investigation, and scheduled a formal evidentiary hearing with strong language about potential misconduct and reputational harm. It was not the final verdict. Marisol warned them twice. But outside the courthouse, reporters asked different questions than they had asked that morning. They asked Harold how it felt to hear new evidence. Harold looked overwhelmed. Cole expected him to say nothing. Instead, Harold leaned toward the microphones and said, "I feel tired. I feel grateful. I feel like my daughter was still telling the truth after all these years." Martha wept quietly. Evelyn stood behind them, one hand over her mouth. Lydia slipped out a side door to avoid cameras, and Cole let her go. Not every act of courage needed applause. Grant did not speak to reporters. Warren was helped into a car, his face gray with strain. Cole watched from the courthouse steps, careful not to turn an old man's frailty into satisfaction. Harm did not become holy because it circled back. But accountability had begun, and that mattered. Deputy Bell approached Harold before the Reeds left. He removed his hat. "Sir, I was a kid when all this happened. My dad worked resort security. I heard things at home I shouldn't have believed." Harold studied him. "You here as deputy or boy?" Belle swallowed. Both, I think. Harold nodded. Then both can do better. Belle's eyes shone. Yes, sir. It was another apology without a neat bow. The day had collected several. That evening at the ranch, Martha cooked breakfast for supper because she said the day needed beginning again. Pancakes, eggs, potatoes, coffee, and biscuits, for which Ranger conducted a focused campaign. Harold sat at the head of the long folding table. Evelyn, Marisol, Dana, Lydia, Cole, and a few volunteers ate together under construction lights. No one pretended the fight was over. Grant still had lawyers, Warren still had influence, the formal hearing remained ahead. But the shape of the story had changed in public, and public truth carries a warmth private truth cannot. Harold raised his mug. To Abigail, he said. Everyone lifted whatever they held. Cole lifted coffee. Lydia lifted tea with both hands. Ranger barked once, startling the room into laughter. Harold smiled. Yes, you too. Later, when dishes were done and the others had gone, Cole stepped onto the porch with Abigail's Bible and found Martha there, looking at the stars between moving clouds. She waited for you, Martha said without accusation. I know. She also lived while waiting. Remember that. Don't make her life only about your absence. Cole nodded. Evelyn told me something similar. Evelyn occasionally says sense by accident. Martha's mouth softened. You are doing good, Cole. But don't confuse clearing Harold's name with punishing yourself enough. The Lord is not keeping score the way men do. Cole did not know what to say. Ranger came out, pushed his nose into Cole's hand, and answered for him by staying. Spring in the high country is less a season than a negotiation. Snow agrees to leave the sunny slopes, then returns overnight to remind everyone who wrote the first draft. In the weeks after the preliminary hearing, the ranch lived inside that uncertainty. Some mornings the pasture shone green in strips along the fence. By afternoon, flakes drifted again past the kitchen windows, where Harold taught volunteers how to make stock without insulting the bones. The formal evidentiary hearing was set for May, and Marisol warned that the Voss legal team would use every delay available. She was right. Motions arrived like weather. Challenges to evidence handling, questions about Lydia's state of mind, attempts to separate the mail issue from the fire issue, requests to limit public access. Cole answered each through counsel, though more than once he chopped wood behind the barn until his shoulders burned, because paper combat did not give the body anywhere to put anger. Ranger accompanied him, collecting sticks Cole had not thrown and presenting them as if helping with discovery. Wrong branch of law, Cole told him. Ranger wagged anyway. Grant's public manner changed. He stopped smiling as much. He appeared at charity events looking strained but brave, giving short statements about family faith and the danger of rushing to judgment. Cole refused to watch most of them. Harold watched one by accident at Parker's Market when the local news played above the coffee station. Grant said, "We have compassion for those who are confused by old pain." Harold set down his cup so carefully that Evelyn moved the sugar jar out of his reach. Confused, he repeated. Martha beside him lifted her chin. We are not confused, we are seasoned. Evelyn looked at Cole. That goes on a mug too. Harold said, no mugs until this is done. Evelyn whispered, coward. Ranger, lying by the door, sighed like an elder statesman tired of branding disputes. Lydia became the target of softer cruelty, the kind that leaves no mark visible enough for neighbors to condemn. Former friends stopped inviting her. The Silver Ridge Foundation replaced her name on the website with a vague notice about leadership transition. Warren sent messages through relatives asking her to come home and stop embarrassing the family while there was still time. She stayed in a small room above Evelyn's store because she did not feel safe emotionally at the resort and because Evelyn had discovered that repentance came with spare linens. Martha brought soup. Harold sent coffee and one note: truth-telling burns calories. Eat. Lydia taped it to the mirror. Cole saw it once when delivering documents and felt a deep, complicated tenderness for Harold's awkward mercy. He did not forgive cheaply. He fed people anyway. The state investigation expanded. Grant was not arrested in some dramatic roadside scene. The truth moved through interviews, subpoenas, bank records, archived video, and attorneys speaking in conference rooms. For a YouTube story hungry for spectacle, it might have seemed slow. Cole had learned that slow justice, when honest, could be more powerful than a chase. It gave victims time to stand upright. It gave lies time to contradict themselves. It gave frightened witnesses time to choose. One of those witnesses was a former Silver Ridge bookkeeper named Nora Bell, Deputy Aaron Bell's aunt, who had retired to Grand Junction. She contacted Marisol after seeing Evelyn's town hall statement online. Nora remembered Grant instructing staff to reclassify missing equipment as fire loss after the warehouse incident. She had kept a notebook because, as she told Cole over video, "I was raised Baptist and suspicious." Evelyn declared this a fine legal qualification. Nora agreed to testify. The Voss side countered by producing old diner debt records to argue that Harold had motive to seek insurance attention or revenge. Marisol dismantled that argument with bank statements, testimony from suppliers, and the thank you card from Warren showing that Harold remained in good standing with Silver Ridge just before the fire. More importantly, she kept returning to the core fact Harold had never been convicted, yet Silver Ridge leadership had allowed and encouraged a public story that destroyed him. "This case is not asking the court to pretend Mr. Reed was wealthy, perfect, or easy," she told Cole during preparation. "It asks the court to recognize that being poor, proud, and inconvenient does not make a man guilty." Cole wrote that sentence in his notebook. Later, Martha saw it and said, "Good. Now believe it about yourself in some other form." Martha had a way of placing spiritual homework where a man expected legal strategy. 2 nights before the formal hearing, Warren Voss requested a private meeting with Harold and Martha. Marisol advised against it, unless counsel was present. Harold surprised everyone by agreeing to meet at the ranch dining hall with Marisol Cole and Warren's attorney in the room. Grant was not invited. Warren arrived in a wheelchair, wrapped in a camel coat, looking diminished by illness, but still carrying command like an old cent in cloth. For a long moment he said nothing. Harold sat across from him, cane between his knees. Martha sat beside Harold, hands folded. Ranger lay under the table, but kept his head up. Warren finally spoke. "I told myself I was protecting the resort." Harold's face did not change. "Were you?" Warren's mouth tightened. "I was protecting my son." "Were you?" The second question landed harder. Warren looked away. "Grant made mistakes," Martha said quietly. "Mistakes are when you salt sugar. What happened to us had signatures." Cole almost smiled, despite the room. Warren's eyes flicked to her, then down. "I am not here to debate words." "That is fortunate," Martha said. "You would lose." Warren had come, it turned out, to ask for mercy without naming truth. He said a public finding would ruin employees, investors, a lifetime of work. He said Grant needed treatment, not prison. He said Lydia had been influenced by guilt. He said Harold and Martha could still be compensated generously. Harold listened until the old man ran out of softer words. Then Harold leaned forward. "Warren, when you let them call me guilty, did you ever picture Martha packing our dishes because the bank took the diner?" Warren's face tightened. "No." "Did you picture Abigail coughing through winter because she worked 3 jobs to keep us fed?" "I did not know. You did not ask. That's different." Warren closed his eyes. Harold's voice grew quieter. "I don't want your son crushed for sport. I don't want you dead from shame. I want the truth on the record, where my wife can see it, where my daughter's grave can sit under a clean name, where this town can stop whispering, smoke, when it says read." The room held still. Warren's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Martha reached for Harold's hand. Warren opened his eyes, and for once there was no speech left that could improve him. "I cannot stop Grant," he said. "No," Harold answered. "But you could stop standing in front of him." The hearing lasted 2 days. It was not cinematic in the usual sense. There were no shouted confessions, no last-minute witness bursting through doors. There were documents placed in order, witnesses sworn in, experts explaining, lawyers objecting, a judge taking notes, and an old couple enduring the public measurement of their pain. Yet to Cole, it felt more intense than any spectacle, because every quiet sentence mattered. Nora Bell testified. Luis Ortega testified. Lydia testified again, steadier this time. Dana connected the money. The lab expert connected the fuel. Evelyn connected the letters. Martha connected the thank you card. Harold testified last. Marisol asked him what the accusation had cost. He looked at his hands for so long the judge gently told him to take his time. "It cost work," Harold said. "Then friends. Then the diner. Then my daughter's peace, maybe some of her health. It cost my wife sleep. It cost me the ability to walk into a room without wondering who believed what. But the strangest cost was this: after enough years I started speaking softly, even when I knew I was telling the truth." Martha wept openly. Cole stared down at the floor. Ranger pressed against his leg. Daniel Price cross-examined with restraint, perhaps because even he understood the room had limits. He asked Harold about debts, anger, memory gaps from the night of the fire, and his delayed pursuit of legal remedies. Harold answered plainly. "I was poor. I was angry. Smoke confused me. Lawyers cost money. None of that made me a liar." It was the clearest sentence of the case. Even the judge paused after writing it down. Grant did not look at Harold. Lydia did. Warren watched his son, and something in his face seemed to collapse inward. The judge's ruling came late on the second day. He found sufficient basis to formally clear Harold Reed in the civil record, vacate prior findings and statements that had treated him as responsible, refer evidence for criminal and financial investigation of Grant Voss and associated entities, freeze disputed lien actions tied to the Reed cabin, and allow the Reed's damages claim to proceed. He also criticized Silver Ridge leadership for allowing an unproven accusation to function as punishment outside court. The language was careful, legal, and devastating. Harold did not react at first. Martha understood before he did. She covered her face and bowed over the table. Evelyn whispered, "Thank you, Lord," again and again. Cole felt his own knees weaken, an absurd response for a man still standing perfectly straight. Ranger stood and placed his front paws gently on Harold's lap. This time no one corrected him. Harold lowered his forehead to the dog's head. "My name," he whispered. "Martha, they gave me back my name." Martha put both arms around him. "No, dear," she said through tears. "They admitted it was always yours." Outside cameras waited, but Marisol helped them leave through a side exit at Harold's request. He did not want spectacle. He wanted air. They stood in a small courtyard where rain had stopped and clouds were tearing open above the courthouse roof. Lydia came out last. Harold saw her and beckoned. She approached, as if expecting sentence. "Your telling helped," he said. Lydia began to cry. "I'm sorry it took so long," Harold nodded. "Me too." Then he held out his hand. She took it. No embrace, no instant absolution, a hand held long enough to say the future might not be only punishment. Cole looked away, giving them privacy. Across the lot, Grant was being surrounded by attorneys and investigators, his face pale, his phone pressed to his ear. Cole felt no triumph. only relief edged with grief. Accountability is not revenge when it arrives clean. It is simply the bill lies hoped would never come due. The return to the ranch felt quieter than celebration and larger than rest. Volunteers had hung a banner in the dining hall that read, "Welcome home, Reeds." Harold complained that he had never left, then stood under it for several seconds with his mouth trembling. Martha touched every table as if blessing it. Evelyn fussed with coffee. Lydia sat in a corner until Martha brought her a bowl of stew and told her exile should not be attempted hungry. Cole went to the porch and called Dana, who pretended not to be emotional by discussing next legal steps too fast. "You did good," she said finally. "We did careful. Same thing when it works." Ranger came outside carrying one of Harold's new oversized mugs in his mouth. Cole took it before the dog could turn justice into pottery loss. From inside came Harold's voice. "That dog is unionizing." Laughter followed. Cole stood in the damp spring air listening. A home is sometimes not a building, but the first room where laughter returns after truth. He did not know if he belonged in that room permanently, but for once he did not feel the need to leave before finding out. May opened the valley like a careful hand. Snow remained in the high gullies and under the black shade of spruce, but the pasture below the ranch had turned green enough to surprise everyone who had spent months looking at white. Meltwater ran in bright threads beside the road. Mud clung to boots. Birds returned with the noisy confidence of creatures who had not attended a single hearing and therefore believed life was simple. The Veterans Center received its final permit on a Thursday afternoon, while Harold was arguing with a commercial mixer and Martha was labeling pantry shelves in handwriting so neat it made Cole stand straighter. Evelyn read the approval email aloud 3 times, each time adding drama until Marisol threatened to revoke her access to punctuation. Ranger celebrated by stealing a dish towel and leading Cole on a slow chase around the kitchen island, careful not to actually escape, because at 7 years old, he understood theater. Harold laughed so hard he had to sit down. That laugh, more than the permit, more than the court language, told Cole something had shifted. Not healed completely. Shifted. Some burdens do not vanish. They become carried by more hands. The center's name had been debated for 2 weeks. Cole wanted something plain, high country veterans recovery. Evelyn called it respectable and forgettable, which from her mouth sounded like a felony. Martha suggested Hearth House. Harold said every place in Colorado with soup thought it owned the word hearth. Lydia quietly suggested Abigail House during a planning meeting, and then looked as if she wished she could fold herself into the napkins. The room went still. Harold stared at the table. Martha's eyes filled. Cole felt the name move through him with both pain and rightness. Abigail House, Harold said at last. She'd complain it sounded too fancy, Martha smiled through tears. Then we will let her complain from heaven. Cole registered the name that afternoon. When the sign arrived, carved cedar with simple dark letters, they gathered in the yard to watch it mounted beside the drive. Abigail House. Beneath it, smaller recovery kitchen community. Harold touched the post after the workers stepped back. She always did like feeding strays, he said. Ranger leaned against his leg. Yes, Martha said. And stubborn soldiers. The Reed cabin was not abandoned. That mattered to Harold. The damages process would take time and the criminal investigation into Grant Voss would move on its own schedule, but the lien had been unwound and the cabin legally secured before summer. Cole offered to buy it outright and transfer it into a trust for Harold and Martha. Harold refused, so fast Ranger barked, Marisol found a better way. Settlement advances and emergency relief funds tied to the wrongful lien allowed the Reeds to repair the cabin in their own names, with Cole's project hiring the same contractors for accessibility upgrades as part of a documented employee housing safety arrangement. Harold grumbled at every clause and approved every handrail. The roof was replaced, wiring was fixed,
The plastic window became real glass. The porch gained 2 sturdy steps and a ramp Harold pretended to dislike until Martha used it without pain. The red notice came down on a clear morning. Harold removed it himself,
Folded it once, and placed it in the stove without ceremony. No speech, just paper becoming ash in a place where paper had once done too much harm. Grant Voss's downfall did not unfold as a satisfying public collapse because real accountability rarely arranges itself for neat applause. State investigators filed charges related to financial misconduct, evidence concealment, and false statements. Insurance authorities opened their own case. Silver Ridge's board, suddenly fond of ethics, removed Grant from operations and hired outside auditors. Warren Voss resigned from the board, citing health. Some townspeople said the punishment was too much. Others said it was not enough. Harold refused to let the ranch kitchen become a courtroom after hours. "The judge has chairs for that," he said. "My chairs are for eating." Lydia testified when asked, answered calls from investigators, and began working with a small transparency nonprofit in Durango. She also volunteered at Abigail House twice a week, washing dishes under Harold's supervision. The first time she broke a mug, she froze, as if expecting judgment from heaven and every reed at once. Harold looked at the pieces, sighed, and said, "It was too small anyway." Lydia laughed, then cried. Martha handed her a towel and said both reactions were acceptable, but the floor still needed sweeping. The opening day of Abigail House came in June, under a sky so blue it looked freshly made. Veterans arrived in ones and twos, some with spouses, some alone, some wearing ball caps pulled low, some talking too much, some not at all. Cole recognized each strategy. He had worn several. The dining hall smelled of coffee biscuits, green chili stew, and the lemon oil Martha had rubbed into the tables that morning. Harold stood behind the serving counter in a clean apron embroidered with his name. He complained about the angle of the ladle, the weakness of the first coffee batch, and the emotional instability of volunteers who cried near onions. Martha greeted every guest as if she had been expecting them personally. Evelyn ran the sign-in table and only lost her glasses twice. Lydia arranged donated coats by size. Ranger stationed himself near the entrance, accepting cautious hands, leaning into the ones that shook, ignoring the ones that tried too hard. One young Marine veteran stopped at the doorway, face tight, eyes scanning exits. Cole saw it and started to approach, then stopped when Harold came around the counter carrying a mug. "Back wall seat?" Harold asked. The young man blinked. "Yes, sir." Harold pointed. "Got one saved. Coffee strong, soup's better, dog's nosy but discreet." The young man almost smiled. Cole looked away before the moment noticed him watching. That afternoon after lunch, they held no ribbon cutting. Cole had refused. Instead, Harold rang the old dinner bell from Reed's hearth, recovered from a storage shed behind the former diner after Ben Haskell remembered buying it at auction and feeling guilty every time he saw it. The bell's sound carried across the pasture, not loud, not grand, but clear. People stood quietly. Martha held Abigail's Bible. Cole stood beside Ranger with his hands in his jacket pockets, fingers resting on the old Seal Memorial coin he had carried for years. He thought of the first day he saw Harold and Martha, in the storm pans clanging like a broken parade, backs bent under what the town had made them carry. Now those same pans hung in the Abigail House kitchen, polished but not hidden, each dent left visible. Martha had insisted. "Scars are not decorations," she said, "but neither are they shame." Above the stove, Harold mounted the scorched skillet in a shadow box with a small plaque, "What survives can speak." Cole had objected that it might be too heavy for a kitchen wall. Harold said the wall had better toughen up. Cole's own staying happened without announcement. He moved his company's headquarters to a smaller Denver office managed by Dana and took a converted tack room at Abigail House for his local work. He still traveled when needed, but he returned. That was the difference. He attended permit meetings, washed dishes, badly drove Harold to appointments when Harold allowed it, and sat with Martha on the porch when she wanted to talk about Abigail in small, ordinary pieces. Not the tragedy version, the real version. Abigail burning biscuits because she got distracted reading. Abigail singing the wrong verse at church with conviction. Abigail hiding money in flour tins because Harold could never remember where he put emergency cash. Abigail loving Cole, yes, but also living beyond him. That saved him. Grief became less like a stone altar and more like a table where memories could sit without demanding blood. One evening, Martha handed him a packet of Abigail's letters tied with blue ribbon. "Not all at once," she said. "A heart is not a storage closet." He obeyed. Mostly. Harold's health improved, in the way old bodies sometimes improve when warmth, medicine, food, and purpose finally agree to cooperate. He still coughed. He still tired. He still pretended not to. But his color returned, his steps steadied, and he gained enough weight for Martha to announce that his suspenders no longer looked lonely. The cabin became their quiet place, the ranch their work, and Abigail House the living bridge between the two. On Sundays after church, they hosted community meals. Some people came to apologize, some came because the food was good. Harold accepted both categories but trusted neither too quickly. Forgiveness, he said, was like bread dough, rush it and you get something tough in the middle. Evelyn wrote that down for a future mug Harold still refused to authorize. Deputy Bell volunteered on weekends, washing pots with the humble seriousness of a man cleaning inherited silence from his own hands. Luis Ortega visited in July with his family, and Harold served him 2 bowls of stew without speaking of debt. That was the speech. Lydia's place in the story remained complicated, which made it honest. Some residents avoided her, some thanked her. She spent months learning how to be lonely without letting loneliness drive her back to dishonesty. Martha gave her small tasks, then larger ones. Evelyn gave her too much advice, some of it useful. Cole gave her respectful distance. Harold gave her coffee. One afternoon, Lydia stood before the shadow box holding the skillet and said, "I wish I had been braver sooner." Harold, cleaning the counter, did not stop working. "Most brave is late. That's why it has to hurry once it arrives." Lydia nodded. "Do you forgive me?" The question froze the room for a second. Harold dried his hands. "Some days I am near it. Some days I am not. I won't lie to make you feel better." Lydia accepted that with tears in her eyes. Martha touched her shoulder. "Keep coming anyway." She did. That became its own kind of answer. As for Cole, the town stopped asking when he would leave. At first because Evelyn threatened to charge a gossip tax. Later because his truck remained outside Abigail House through storms, thaw, mud season, and the first gold of autumn aspens. He did not become uncomplicated. No man with his memories does. Some nights he still woke with his pulse racing. Some days he went quiet enough that Martha placed food near him without asking questions. Ranger aged with dignity and selective obedience, his muzzle growing pale, his talent for biscuit acquisition undiminished. Veterans loved him. Harold claimed Ranger inflated his own legend by staring meaningfully at new arrivals until they dropped crumbs out of guilt. Cole called that therapeutic engagement. Marisol said she would not defend it in court. The wedding people expected never came because this was not that kind of love story. Abigail was gone, and the ending did not require replacing her. Instead, the love that returned was broader and in some ways harder earned. A son's love for the old couple who had once fed him a community, learning to repair what silence had helped break. A former SEAL learning that staying could be braver than leaving. and a canine who understood from the beginning that lost things were not always gone. On the first anniversary of the day Cole saw the reeds in the snow, they gathered at Abigail House for a winter supper. Outside, snow fell again, thick and white. But inside, the kitchen glowed. The old pans hung above the stove, the big mugs lined the shelves. Harold rang the dinner bell. Martha said grace, thanking God not for easy roads, but for hands to hold on the hard ones. Cole looked around the room. Evelyn laughing too loudly, Lydia serving stew, Deputy Bell stacking chairs, veterans sitting with their backs where they needed them. Ranger asleep beneath Harold's stool with one eye open for falling biscuits. Snow pressed against the windows, but it no longer looked like burial. It looked like weather. Just weather. And when Harold lifted his mug toward Cole from across the room, no speech passed between them. None was needed. The boy who had left in shame had come back in boots. The old man who had carried pans through a storm had his name, his kitchen, and his family of choice restored. Somewhere beyond the glass, the mountains kept their silence. Inside, the living answered with soup laughter, work, and the stubborn music of things repaired. Some stories remind us that God often works through ordinary hands. A warm bowl of soup, a dog who refuses to ignore what others missed, a neighbor brave enough to admit she stayed silent, a tired old man willing to stand for the truth even when comfort is offered in exchange for quiet. Harold and Martha's journey teaches us that dignity can bend under hardship, but it does not have to break. Cole's journey teaches us that regret becomes holy only when it turns into responsibility, patience, and love in action. If this story touched your heart, comment Amen and share it with someone who needs courage today. May we all learn to speak truth gently, help without humiliating, forgive without pretending pain was small, and stay beside the people God places on our road.